Magical World War I. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 601 Black Monkey. Charlotte was very surprised to see the visitor and called out, "Hughes, why are you here?" Hughes looked grim and asked, "Aren't we old friends?" He emphasized the word old friend. Charlotte couldn't help laughing and said, "We are really old friends." The relationship between the two was complicated. Although they hated each other deeply, they also had a very strange friendship. Charlotte stepped aside and invited Hughes into the room, saying, "It's a little messy, please don't mind. I have Farz's standard coffee here. Would you like a cup?" He didn't know what Hughes wanted to ask him, but he didn't rush to ask, because Hughes would tell him anyway. Hughes didn't care about the mess here. He had been fighting for years. What kind of environment had he not experienced? For Teacher Jack, he sat on a chair, raised his coffee, took a sip, closed his eyes and savored it, and said, "The South Seraph Restoration Army is almost out of people." Charlotte nodded and said, "I know. The South Seraph women went through life and death for Byron and fought with Farz for many years. It was a small miracle that there were still people alive. It was a literary work that a few veterans were left." Hughes was able to ensure the organization of this army and maintain a certain scale. He was indeed a first-class talent and an outstanding military commander. Hughes asked, "I heard that Teacher Vigo is doing well." Charlotte shrugged and replied, "I never ask about the private lives of my subordinates. Maybe he thinks this kind of life is enjoyable, maybe he thinks this kind of life is torment, who can tell? He is now the commander of the Dalma base. You know, most South Sera people are tired of war, and Vigo doesn't like fighting very much. The Dalma base almost never goes to the battlefield. I hope he will be like all the South Sera people who have been under my rule, forget hatred, and be able to settle down anywhere. There will be no hatred because of their identity, and they will not have to go to war just because they are South Sera people." Hughes sighed and was speechless for a long time. He knew that under Charlotte's rule, the South Sera people were fanatical and loyal, and were even willing to obey Charlotte's orders, leave their homes, and go to other places to avoid the war. Charlotte will also protect all the South Sera people as much as possible during the war, and will try to compensate every South Sera person after the war, so that they can not only restore everything they once had, but also live a better life. Hughes's men are all South Sera people, and they often contact their compatriots under Charlotte's rule. These South Sera Restoration Army soldiers will lose their fighting spirit every time they contact old acquaintances. Although the South Sera region is gone now, it has been occupied by the New Continental Congress and changed into the New Continental Congress Free Zone, but no South Sera person is dissatisfied with this, because they are willing to live in the New Continental Congress area and can still maintain their original life. Even if they are wronged, they can complain to Mecklenburg, and Mecklenburg will really stand up for them. If they are willing to go to other places, every area of Mecklenburg welcomes them. Hughes also knew that almost every lady of South Sera would proudly say when talking about her life, "We are much better than those bastards in Behemoth." Although Charlotte temporarily managed Behemoth for a period of time, the old Emperor of Brittany did not confer Behemoth on him in the end. He just turned the duchy into a region and placed it under the direct jurisdiction of Strasbourg. This led to the fact that the standard of living in Behemoth was, as usual, similar to that of the rest of Farz, and much inferior to the Dukedom of Mechlin, where the economy was developing rapidly and life was changing with each passing day. This was the biggest reason for the pride of the ladies of South Sera. The original enemies were no longer as good as themselves. Charlotte did not speak either. He knew who Hughes was. He was determined and could not be shaken by words. Xiuc was silent for a long time, and said, "I have decided to become a vampire, but most of my South Seraph Restoration Army want to go back home. I have no way back, but the South Seraph warriors should not continue to die for the war in Byron." Charlotte said, "Do you want me to take them in?" Xiuc nodded. Charlotte replied, "Okay." Xiuc stood up and bowed slightly, performed an imperial salute, and then left Charlotte's residence without saying a word. Charlotte shook her head and said nothing. It was so bad that a proud man like Xiuc put aside his hatred and begged him to take them in. He accepted this group of people, which was actually a win-win situation. First, there would be no more South Seraph Restoration Army in the old continent. Secondly, he would gain the favor of all South Seraph women. Charlotte would not really treat these veterans of the South Seraph Restoration Army the same as ordinary South Seraph people, because these people are fanatics, and there is no way to change them. They are just tired, but sooner or later they will burst out with resistance again. Charlotte will send them all to the new Continental Congress Free Zone, and use various benefits to coax them to the Sea of Ogles to disperse them. There is no way to let this group of diehards integrate into her Duchy of Mechlin. Not long after Hughes left, hundreds of ragged veterans arrived outside Charlotte's residence. The eyes of each of them were filled with resentment. But in addition to resentment, there was also deep fatigue. Charlotte knew that since he had killed Jonathan, these veterans of the Yugoslav Restoration Army would never forgive him, so he did not expect to move these people to tears with a passionate speech. He just gave a few simple instructions and prepared to arrange for them to go to Moldova, and then through the maze passage of Moldova, send them to the current New World Conference Free Zone. An old veteran stepped forward and shouted, "We need food, water, shelter, and weapons." Charlotte shook her head and said, "This is a war zone, and supplies are tight. I can only arrange some food and water. There is no shelter and no weapons. But if everyone sets off quickly, as long as we reach Moldova, there will be enough supplies and everyone's requirements can be met." The veteran said with a firm look in his eyes, "Without enough supplies, we won't go anywhere." Charlotte sighed and was about to retort directly and tell them to go back to find Hughes, when he heard people everywhere in the city shouting, "Monkeys, big black monkeys. Black monkeys as tall as mountains." Charlotte left this group of veterans of the Yugoslav Restoration Army and floated into the air. His face suddenly changed. He also saw outside the city of Shell a huge black monkey as big as a mountain, carrying 2 peeled trees and walking towards the city wall with rumbling footsteps. Chapter 602. I know. There needs to be a man in this family. The first thing that came to Charlotte's mind was that before he traveled through time, there was a much-anticipated domestic 3A game that was the protagonist. Unfortunately, after traveling through time, he was destined not to play that game, and he was looking forward to it. The second reaction was straightforward: this is a fucking evil god. Charlotte didn't have time to care about the old soldiers of the South Seraph Restoration Army, and just hurriedly said, "If you are willing to go to the Duke of Mechlin, hurry up and go to Moldova. If you don't want to go, I won't force you." He didn't even have the patience to wait for the answer from these old soldiers, and rushed out of the city. At this time, 4 or 5 saints had come out outside the city of Shell to stop this incarnation of the evil god. However, the level of these saints who took action was average, and they could only fly around this evil god like flies, and all their attacks seemed weak. Facing such a huge evil god, Charlotte didn't shout, "Everyone get out of the way" or something like that, but directly smashed the Holy Light God Kingdom from the sky without saying a word. This black ape, with a body as big as a mountain, and a head that was even bigger than a legendary warship like the Holy Light Kingdom, could not help but howl in pain after being hit on the forehead by the Holy Light Kingdom. The Holy Light Kingdom did not hurt the incarnation of the evil god, but directly stabbed into his forehead. At the same time, countless vines flew out of the Holy Light Kingdom and pierced into the head of the evil god. In the next second, Charlotte even saw countless strange eyes around the hole on the forehead of the evil god, which made him close his eyes quickly and dared not look anymore. Fighting with an incarnation of an evil god is very difficult. Charlotte has experience. The last time he killed the incarnation of the fire evil god Enlulu, it was Lady Black Moon who took action. He, Antonio and others alone could not do anything to the incarnation of the evil god, and they didn't know how long the battle would last. So this time, Charlotte was very wise and threw out the Holy Light Kingdom directly. Charlotte had been on the Holy Light God country and had no feelings, but in fact, this legendary warship had undergone earth-shaking changes after swallowing Agmaris. The holy orders who were besieging the incarnation of the evil god saw Charlotte throw out the Holy Light God country and quickly withdrew from the battle. The Holy Light God country is now considered to be notorious. The various entertainment measures on the ship are well known in the old continent, but this legendary warship is composed of 5 evil gods and is also famous in the old continent. In the old continent, there is a rumor: if you hate someone, send him to the Holy Light God country. If you like someone, send him to the Holy Light God country. Almost everyone knows that the Holy Light God country has the most extreme enjoyment in the world, and everyone knows that this evil legendary warship can treat the holy orders as dessert after a meal. The holy orders of various countries who withdrew from the battle soon saw a grand scene that they had never seen in their lives. First, the vines and branches spread from the Holy Light Kingdom, and even drilled into the brain of the black ape. From the eyes, ears, mouth, nostrils, and even pores of the black monkey, emerald green color appeared. Then countless feathers replaced the hair on his face, and then the eyes spread along with the wound. The black ape struggled to grab the Holy Light Kingdom, trying to pull it out of his head, but as he pulled hard, a pool of blue seawater emerged from the Holy Light Kingdom. This seawater rushed into his mouth, nostrils, eyes, and pores, and soon penetrated into it. After a while, countless blue bubbles emerged from the body of the black ape, and in each bubble there was a giant whale, or a ferocious sea snake. More and more saints from various countries soared into the sky, and countless generals and soldiers from various countries rushed to the top of the city, watching this incredible scene. Many of them had never seen the fight between evil gods, and this time was an eye-opener. The Holy Light God country that was pulled out by the black ape shattered in his palm, but his entire head, as it was pulled out, turned into a very strange shape. It could no longer be seen as a head, but just like a mass of meat, full of things with strange smells. Charlotte retreated a long way and then opened his eyes. He immediately saw the black ape turned into this appearance. He couldn't help but secretly wondered in his heart, is the Holy Light God country so evil? I have always thought that it is very evil, but I didn't expect it to be even more evil among the evil gods. I wonder which evil god this black ape is. This incarnation of him must be explained here. Charlotte took a deep breath and suddenly flew towards the black ape at full speed. He rushed into the hundreds of meters of the evil god's incarnation, and his body disappeared like a bubble, which made all the saints of various countries who were watching the battle amazed. They didn't know whether Charlotte was dead or alive, and why he was so unwise. Charlotte had experience long ago. He was certainly not unwise, but wanted to join the battle and grab the fruits of victory. After rushing into the black ape within a few hundred meters, he felt the night suddenly appear in front of him. He once again stepped into the magnificent palace. Omi Bella, Dapo Kiloaruo, Ivan, Vasuji and Amen were looking at the huge black evil god outside the palace. This huge black ape was a general wearing black armor in this world. His body was even bigger than in the outside world. He held a strange double-edged broadsword in his hand. This double-edged broadsword also had a long handle. When it was swung slightly, the blade light was like lightning, and it chopped down the sky above the Holy Light God Kingdom one by one. Although it was blocked by the invisible evil god force field outside the Holy Light God Kingdom every time, it still chopped down this magnificent palace and shook it endlessly, looking precarious. Charlotte shouted without hesitation, "Help me!" Amabella clenched her fists and shouted, "I knew it. There must be a man in this family." The rest of them did not speak, but Charlotte felt that several forces gathered in his body, and his body swelled up. He took out the blood spirit and turned it into a flaming spear. He fought fiercely with the armored warrior incarnated by the black ape under the black sky. Charlotte had rich experience in fighting evil gods. He pushed his speed to the limit and kept picking up some pieces from the evil god, including parts of armor, hair exposed outside the armor, decorations on the body, and flesh and blood. These things picked up by Charlotte with a flaming spear will be attracted by a force and fall into the Holy Light God Kingdom. At this moment, Charlotte was sorry that Emilia was not there, otherwise the father and daughter would have a better battle. Charlotte even missed a feeling of swinging Emilia to hit the evil god. Chapter 603, Assisting in the Battle. It's a pity that the Emilia can't land. Charlotte passed by. He had seen the blade of the double-edged broadsword clearly. Inside the black armor, there was still a huge black ape. Even the pair of large hands exposed were furry, with countless black hairs. The double-edged broadsword in the hands of the black ape was as fast as thunder and lightning. If he hadn't already maxed out the light agility skill and had the help of 5 evil god-level family members, he would have been killed by him like a fly in a few encounters. Although Charlotte's body became extremely huge with the support of Amabella, Tapachirado, Ivan, Vasuji and Amen, there was still a huge gap between him and the ape evil god. He was at most a dozen meters, but this black ape was more than a dozen kilometers. With Charlotte Mecklen's attack, the black ape had to use at least 30% of its attack to drive him away, and the number of swords that fell on the Holy Light God's kingdom was reduced. Although the 5 masters of the Holy Light God's kingdom, 4 of them looked timid and incompetent women, and 1 was Amen, who was even a child, they were definitely not inferior to any evil god in terms of evil. The frequency of their attacks decreased, and they could exert more evil god power. Soon Charlotte saw that there was a faint layer of green on the black ape's body. This layer of green suddenly shook and actually fell off, taking off most of the black ape's armor. Charlotte then heard Dapokiloaruo's happy cry, and this layer of green wrapped half of the armor and fell on the holy light god's kingdom. In just over 10 minutes, a layer of armor suddenly grew on Charlotte's body. It was woven from vines, and each armor leaf was made of wood. There were flowers and grass leaves between the armor leaves. This layer of armor looked pleasing to the eye, just like the armor of an elf, but the defense was really good, and even improved Charlotte's various abilities by one level. Charlotte cheered and rushed towards the black ape. Taking advantage of the fact that his armor was incomplete, she circled his waist for 70 or 80 times. The flaming spear dragged a long string of sparks on the belly of this evil god. It was unknown which time the result was achieved. The belly of this evil god suddenly cracked open, and a mass of seawater gushed out, wrapped in a large mass of internal organs, and rushed into the holy light god kingdom. Charlotte then heard the laughter of two other women, the giant whale king Ivan and the sea serpent Vasuji. The power they provided was then slightly enhanced. No one could see Charlotte's battle in the black sky, but the saints of various countries saw that after Charlotte disappeared, various wounds continued to appear on the black ape's body. Even a few hours later, his brain suddenly exploded, and all the brain matter disappeared into the air. No one knew what was going on, but everyone could guess that Charlotte and the evil legendary warship should have the upper hand. Soon two big figures appeared in the sky. Count Constantine greeted the only great human philosopher in the world, Borosher, from a distance. Even with the pride of Count Constantine, he respected this great human philosopher and believed that this great philosopher's strength was far above his. Boros smiled slightly, first added a layer of defensive magic circle for himself, hesitated for a moment, and actually added a layer of defensive magic circle for Count Constantine, and then said, "Count Constantine, that Duke Charlotte Mecklen seems to have fought with the evil god Tuo Li Tang in the god realm. Should we go to help?" Constantine shook his head slowly. What a joke. Although he was at the peak of the saint rank, he definitely didn't want to go to the god realm where only gods could live in the legend and fight with an evil god. Tuo Li Tang was the most ferocious evil god on the old world. The New World fleet of Red Eagle was destroyed by this evil god. Tuo Li Tang often descended to incarnate and went around looking for opponents to fight a hardy and unscrupulous battle. He was also the most warlike evil god in the New World. Although Constantine lived in the Old World, he was not completely ignorant of the evil gods in the New World. He still had a good understanding of them. He knew that with his own strength, he could not do anything to Tuo Li Tang, even if he entered the legendary god realm. Boros here persuaded, Duke Mecklen must have a way to let us join the battle. This is the greatest crisis for mankind, and no one can stay out of it. Count Constantine, come with me to take a look. If you don't want to help, I'll send you out. Constantine pondered for a while and said, okay. He was also curious about the other dimension where the gods lived in the legend, but he had no way to get in. Boros here actually said that Charlotte was fighting in that world and there was a way to get in and participate in the battle. He believed it about 70%. Since Borosher agreed that if he didn't participate in the battle, he could send him out, Constantine had no reason to refuse. Boros here smiled slightly, waved his hand, and the two disappeared into the air, leaving everyone who saw this scene so surprised that they didn't know what to say. At this moment, someone has guessed that Charlotte is fighting in another world. There are very few people in the old continent who are good at manipulating space, but there are some. The knowledge about the other dimension is just scarce, not non-existent. Constantine narrowed his eyes slightly. He saw the huge Holy Light Kingdom. This legendary warship turned into a palace. It was too luxurious. In this world, the Holy Light Kingdom was like a city. It was not inferior to the evil god Toltang in size. Constantine also saw the evil god Toltang, which was even bigger than the one outside. Because the black armor on his body was stripped off by Dapokiloaru, his body covered with black hair was exposed. He looked no different from the outside, except that there was still some armor on part of his body. He couldn't help but close his eyes. Although he was at the peak of the holy level and would not be affected by most evil gods, Constantine still felt that his spirituality was growing wildly. Constantine, as a peak of the holy level, could deeply feel that these growing spiritualities had countless evil buds. If these evil buds were not removed, countless evil thoughts would be bred, and eventually the spirituality would collapse and turn into a monster. Charlotte relied on good luck to clean up her spirituality and had not been affected. Count Constantine didn't have such good luck, but as a peak saint, He naturally had his own methods. He quickly eliminated the unclean things in the growing spirituality, and was thankful to maintain his sanity, resisting the consequences of falling into madness. Boros here looked much better than Constantine. Even when facing two evil gods, he didn't feel strange at all. He even had time to say hello to Charlotte and shouted, "Duke Mechlin, do you need help?" Chapter 604, Snake of Destiny. "You said." Charlotte pointed her finger, and soon Constantine and Boros both felt it. Several forces surged into their bodies, causing their strength to grow explosively. Both were surprised, and then looked at each other, and joined the battle together in tacit understanding. They were all at the peak of the saint rank. No one who had reached this stage wanted to reach the god rank. Although Constantine was far inferior to Juno in the study of the god rank, he was also quite in depth. Boros was a great philosopher, and he had even explored the mysteries of the god rank more deeply than Juno. Now there was an evil god for them to study, so how could they give up? The two rushed into the battle, and soon each tore off a piece of the flesh and blood of the black big monkey, and then hid it secretly. With the help of two more peak saint ranks, more attacks from the evil god Tuolidang were restrained. The family members on the Holy Light God country had different performances. Amun even tried to take a step and disappeared in the Holy Light God country. However, Amun did not appear on the battlefield. He broke into a strange country by connecting with the breath of the evil god Tuolidang. It was a black mountain, with countless black monkeys running around and jumping around. These black monkeys seemed to have no mind, no thoughts, no self, and ran aimlessly. Every movement was like a puppet, mechanical and stiff, with a strange disharmony. Amun reached out and grabbed a black monkey. The black monkey made a sharp cry and struggled hard. Its strength was incredible, but the black monkeys around it seemed to hear nothing. Amun also had no reaction to the struggle of the black monkey. He suddenly opened his mouth, and his mouth expanded to an incredible size. His mouth was full of round eyes, and he bit off the head of the black monkey in one bite. After eating the black monkey's head, Amun threw the black monkey's body on the ground and strode up the black mountain. He kept eating along the way. He only ate the black monkey's head and threw the black monkey's body with the head bitten off on the ground. Soon, wherever he walked, there were black monkey corpses with a head missing, only the body and limbs left. Amun climbed the mountain all the way. After he walked away, the black monkey corpses trembled slightly. Eyeballs emerged from their broken necks. These eyeballs swarmed out and gathered to the size of a human head. Then they shrank together and turned into Amun's appearance. The monsters with Amun's head but still black ape bodies staggered up and followed Amun silently, walking up the mountain. Amun soon reached the middle of the mountain. A sleeping black big monkey leaned against the rock and looked different. Amun's arrival made it open its eyes. Amun smiled and said, "Tuolidang, is this the last bit of consciousness you have left?" The big black monkey silently took out a black iron rod and said, "Amun, haven't you completely lost your soul and consciousness and been made into a ship? How can you still appear here?" Amun smiled slightly, reached into the void, grabbed a long-handled double-edged broadsword, and said, "Thanks to my father, he gave me a new consciousness, or, you can be his son like me." The big black monkey roared, his hands were like wheels, and he used the black iron rod like a windmill. His eyes were red, and he swung dozens of sticks in an instant. Amun used the double-edged broadsword to take them one by one, and the two fought dozens of moves in just a moment. The black big ape was in an extremely poor state. His strength was not even at the peak of the holy level. Amun easily gained the upper hand. He used his strength to block the stick thrown by the black big ape and reached out to press his chest. The black ape screamed in horror and used his strength to force Amun away, but it was too late. Countless eyes appeared on the places where Amun pressed. He urged the evil power of the evil god to resist the erosion, but more and more eyes appeared on his body. Amun did not make any more moves. He watched the black monkey's body full of eyes. The last trace of consciousness dissipated. He stretched out his hand and grabbed it, and countless eyes flew into his palm. Amun stretched out his hand and slapped the swallowed consciousness into his forehead. On his forehead, a strange evil eye suddenly appeared. This eye was red all over, but there was a circle of light golden light around the pupil. Amun threw away the long-handled double broadsword in his hand, roared and cheered. After a long time, he recovered his bottleneck. Standing on the black mountain, he said to himself lightly, "The consciousness that was split off at the beginning has finally returned to my body. The time to regain my full consciousness is not far away, Snake of Fate. You said at the beginning, Amon said this, and suddenly his whole body trembled, his figure disappeared into nothingness, and disappeared into the black mountain. Under the endless black sky, the battle became more and more intense. Charlotte suddenly realized that something was wrong and hurriedly withdrew from the battle, but saw the black ape, whose huge body like a mountain, suddenly collapsed without any signs. The collapsed body turned into countless branches and vines, rushing seawater, flying feathers, and countless eyeballs. Charlotte was confused and thought to herself, how did we win? Why did the body of this evil god suddenly collapse? Constantine and Boraz did not dare to say. They did not know why the evil god Tualadang suddenly collapsed, but the evil power of this world was getting stronger and stronger. Although they had ways to remove the pollution, they could not stay in such a place for a long time. What's more, the incarnation of the evil god Tualadang collapsed, and the several evil powers in their physical strength were withdrawn one after another. The two looked at each other, and Boraz immediately used his magic power to take Count Constantine away from this alien dimension. The two returned to reality. Constantine was still in shock and asked, "Is this the war between evil gods?" Boraz whispered, "The several divine creatures on the Holy Light Kingdom are not on their complete state. The evil god Tualadang is just an incarnation, not the original body, nor the divine body. This is not a real war between evil gods. The evil god Tualadang has lost an incarnation, and he will definitely come back." Count Constantine took a deep breath and stopped talking. They all saw that Charlotte also appeared. Charlotte looked much worse than they did. His clothes had all been shattered, leaving only a pair of shorts. His entire spirituality was in a state of collapse at any time, and his breath was even weaker. Constantine flew over, grabbed Charlotte, and asked, "How are you?" Charlotte had just fought hard and consumed a lot of physical strength. The 5 divine creatures withdrew their evil power. He needed to calm his spirituality and restore his energy. He whispered, "I need a quiet place to rest for a while." Boraz said, "Go to my place. It's quiet there and no one will disturb me." Chapter 605, The Notes of Don Quixote de Cervantes. Charlotte woke up from meditation. In the blood feast meditation method, he tore apart 2 blood ancestors again, one of which was Karnstein. With the help of this meditation, he drove away ill negative influences and restored the purity of his spirituality. Although Charlotte revised a version of Bloody Glory, it was for the purpose of cultivating loyal subordinates in the future. He still practiced the original version. Protagoras breathing method and blood feast meditation technique are the result of thousands of trials and tribulations. Charlotte is not a genius in practicing new methods. He just supplemented the secret methods of Arthur and Van Gogh without making any fundamental changes. He can sense that his spirituality has been purified and still improved to a certain extent. It is not far from being promoted again. After being promoted to the saint rank, Charlotte's strength has advanced by leaps and bounds. He now understands why there are many saint ranks of the 19th rank in the old continent, but the elites of all countries and races are stuck at the 22nd rank, because there is only one difficulty from the 19th to the 22nd rank, that is, spirituality. Those who are not spiritual enough, such as Vigo and Karen, are stuck at the 19th level and have not made any progress for decades. Those who are spiritual enough will gradually advance, such as Andreas, who is now at the 20th level. If you are spiritual enough and practice diligently, it only takes time to advance to the 22nd level. Above the 23rd level, you must be a peerless genius. Almost all the orc saints who joined Charlotte were at the 22nd level, but as time went on, only the elephant man Agon was promoted to the 23rd level. Charlotte's spirituality is not inferior to that of the peak saints, so he was promoted to the 22nd level without a bottleneck, but only lacked the accumulation of time. Charlotte calmed down and walked out of the meditation room. She saw Boraz and Count Constantine drinking coffee. Seeing him come out, Boraz, the last great philosopher of mankind, put down his coffee cup, smiled and said, "Thank you, Mr. Mecklen, for allowing us to witness the war between the evil gods and obtain some of the evil gods' flesh and blood. This will be of immeasurable benefit to our comprehension of the divine level." Charlotte pondered for a while and said, "If you find it useful, I can invite you to visit the Holy Light God Kingdom." Juno had studied the Holy Light God Kingdom. Charlotte believed that if these 2 peak saints had the opportunity to come into contact with the Holy Light God Kingdom, they would also gain a lot. Constantine could not help but say, "Count Mecklen is so generous. If you need any help in the future, you can always ask Andreas to come to me." Charlotte smiled slightly and thought, "When I meet Teacher Juno, I will definitely let him go to the Emerald Library first. If the teacher thinks that some knowledge can be made public, I can also make it public to them. Charlotte has a close relationship with Juno and Brittany, the top saints of the old world. He would not mind sharing knowledge, but he is a little distant from Boraz, Constantine, and Count Lamarok, who he has not yet met. If it were not for the pressure from Zimmerman and the evil god of the New World, Charlotte would not have shared the Emerald Library with them at all, but in the current crisis, there is no need to cherish it. At this moment, we must unite all the forces that can be united and improve the strength of friendly forces as much as possible. Borazher pondered for a while and said, Duke Mechlin, in order to thank you for your generosity, I can lend you the notes of my teacher Don Quixote Cervantes. However, this is important, please return it to me. Although Charlotte already had the Great Emerald Book and Juno's notes, she was still overjoyed by Borazher's kindness. Don Quixote Cervantes' fame in those days really shocked the continent. After all, he must have countless wonderful ideas, which can be used as a reference for ascending to the gods. He agreed immediately and said, the Holy Light God Kingdom is too large, and there is no place to put it in the city of Cher. Why don't we go out of the city and find an open space? I will put the Holy Light God Kingdom out and invite you two to visit it. Borazher and Count Constantine were overjoyed and accompanied Charlotte to leave the city of Cher and found an open space in a dense forest in the north. Charlotte unsealed the Holy Light God Kingdom and brought 2 peak saints on board. Borazher had no interest in the great limo on the ship. He handed a scroll of notes to Charlotte Mechlin and went to explore the ship. Count Constantine first experienced the various entertainment facilities on the ship, but Charlotte did not bring any subordinates with him, so many entertainment venues were not open, and his experience was not complete. After experiencing the Holy Light God Kingdom, the former Black Phoenix's strongest man also went to explore this legendary warship alone. Charlotte was alone and had no scruples. He stepped into the Emerald Great Library, took out Don Quixote Cervantes' notes, and uploaded the contents of the notes to the library's storage. In just a few minutes, he was surrounded by dozens of ancient alchemists. Since Hermes took control of the power and became the god of gambling and games, Charlotte has become much more lovely in the eyes of these ancient alchemists, and everyone is much more enthusiastic. Soon, each of these ancient alchemists had a roll of notes in their hands. A bald alchemist exclaimed, "It's actually Don Quixote Cervantes' notes. How did you get this thing? It's too precious." These alchemists didn't care that Charlotte was still there and started discussing. Charlotte listened for a while and then left the Emerald Library. Although he had been instilled with countless knowledge and was already a master in alchemy, he still didn't understand it very well. First, he hadn't digested all the knowledge. Second, there was a gap between cramming knowledge and understanding this knowledge. He still needed to learn and understand in order to master all this knowledge. Charlotte didn't want to devote himself to hard study for the time being. Since he had uploaded Don Quixote Cervantes' notes to the Emerald Library and made a backup, there was no need for him to stay any longer. As soon as Charlotte left the Emerald Library, she saw a familiar figure in a black paper suit decorated with snake cards, Hermes cards, dice, roulette, gambling tables and other tools. He also had 2 more dice and a deck of Hermes cards in his hand. He couldn't help but said in surprise, "Teacher Hermes, can you leave the Emerald Library?" Hermes smiled slightly and said, "You can only appear in the Holy Light Kingdom and Hot Spring Mountain, not other places. Well, if you open more casinos in the future, my range of activities will be larger." Charlotte was a little embarrassed. He tried to fool this ancient alchemist master at the beginning, and Hermes had obviously seen through this. However, his authority was condensed through Charlotte's new version of the novel. Even if he saw through it, there was no way to change it. Well, this is also very Charlotte. Chapter 606 Between Life and Death. Hermes did not care about it anymore, and said with a smile, "I just chose to directly instill this notebook. I have a few words to say to you. These words are very important. You must not tell anyone." Charlotte nodded hurriedly when she saw Hermes was so cautious. Hermes said, "Don Quixote Cervantes should still be alive. The direction he explored is different from ours." Charlotte was slightly puzzled. This kind of thing can be inferred by common sense. Why should she be so cautious? Hermes said lightly, "He should have found some way to make himself between life and death, and become an evil spirit like a vampire. Don Quixote Cervantes' research direction is very strange. He chose to separate the body, soul, and consciousness into different dimensions, I don't believe that his research can be completely successful. If he is completely successful, he will be the only god in history who can walk on Earth. But he has disappeared now. There may be some flaws in this method, or he may be trapped in a certain state, but he left the key to summon himself back in the notebook. Borozher should have guessed it, so he didn't show this notebook to anyone. The reason he gave it to you may be, there is some plan. I suggest you return this notebook as soon as possible. If you want to study it in the future, enter the Emerald Library to read it. I believe the Emerald Library is enough to block everything. Charlotte pondered for a long time, nodded, and said, Borozher emphasized that I must return the original. I guess the key to Don Quixote Cervantes' reappearance should be in this notebook, not its content. Hermes suddenly looked up at the sky, smiled and said, someone is coming. He took a step back and disappeared into the air. After a while, more than a dozen saints came down one after another. They were all very excited to see Charlotte. The leading saint said, Duke Mecklen, I heard that there are the ultimate human pleasures on the Holy Light Kingdom. I wonder if I have the honor to visit it. Charlotte was about to answer when she heard the voice of Hermes from a cabin. Sorry, most of the service staff of the Holy Light Kingdom are not here. We can only provide Hermes cards at present. Several saints had heard of Hermes cards. They were all people who had read Anne Mecklen's new novel, but they had never seen this magical card. They said together, I was just about to see it. Is Hermes cards as fun as snake cards? Charlotte shrugged and did not stop these people. Soon, more than a dozen great limo appeared and led this group of saints into a cabin. It was originally a casino. Now most of the service staff were not there, and there were no subordinates of Charlotte Mecklen, so it seemed much quieter. The more than 10 saints sat at the card table and were soon attracted by the complex gameplay of Hermes cards. Half an hour later, generals from other countries came to ask for a meeting. Charlotte let them on board, and soon people arrived one after another, making the Holy Land of Light more and more lively. The great demons that had been nowhere to be seen appeared again. They had body proportions so perfect that humans could not believe it, and faces that were as delicate as a painting without a single flaw. They also had lively and pleasing, calm and indifferent, royal and cold, gentle and charming, and tender and caring personalities. Immediately, the saints and generals from various countries felt like they were in heaven, and they all felt that the Holy Land of Light was indeed worthy of its reputation. Charlotte stood at the bow for a while, and saw Borozher and Count Constantine reappear. She smiled and said, How do you feel? Borozher smiled and said, I have gained a lot. Charlotte handed the notebook of Don Quixote Cervantes to the great philosopher and said, I have finished reading the notebook. Thank you Mr. Borozher for lending such precious knowledge. Borozher carefully put the notebook away and said, If this notebook does not contain some danger, I would not be stingy to give it to you, but it is actually a bit dangerous? Charlotte nodded. With Hermes' reminder, he believed that Borozher was not lying. Count Constantine took a look at the lively Holy Light Kingdom and smiled and said, Now I know why Andreas is unwilling to come back. Charlotte didn't know what to say, so she could only say nothing. Seeing that the two peak saints had no intention of leaving, he invited them to take a bath in the hot spring pool on the ship. Charlotte made some changes to the Holy Light Kingdom according to modern luxury cruise ships. This kind of hot spring pool is a very common facility. The two peak saints readily agreed. The three of them went to the highest deck. Soon, dozens of high-quality great limas came and brought all kinds of fruits, smoothies, barbecues, fruit wine, champagne, beer, and even various drinks that Charlotte invented by chance. When the three took off their clothes and soaked in the hot spring pool, these great limas danced one after another beside the hot spring pool. The dances performed by this group of great limas were all the most popular ones on the internet that Charlotte had seen on Bilibili and Douyin before she crossed over. There were also great limas singing gracefully next to them, or playing musical instruments with background music. Even though the two peak saints claimed to have seen everything in their lives, at this moment, they also had a kind of pleasure that the tyrant would never attend court again. Borozher raised a glass of fruit juice with ice and took a sip. Although the old man was not young, he was still strong. Moreover, the great philosopher of this world had no moral constraints and seemed unusually happy. He said to Charlotte, I heard that there is a hot spring mountain in the dukedom of Mecklen, which is comparable to the Holy Light God Kingdom. Charlotte said, After all, the Holy Light God Kingdom is a legendary battleship. It is often needed on the battlefield and can only provide some entertainment for the officers on the battlefield. I think ordinary people also need a similar life, so I replicated all the entertainment facilities here in Hot Spring Mountain, but Hot Spring Mountain is many times larger than the Holy Light God Kingdom. After all, it is a mountain. Baraziher smiled and asked, when the war is over, I would like to stay in Hot Spring Mountain for a while. Charlotte was overjoyed and said, I will arrange a villa with the best view for Daz, and also arrange the freshest and most delicious dalingmo for Daz. If Daz has any special tastes, it can also be satisfied. Baraziher wanted to go to the Duchy of Mecklenburg. This was a great opportunity. How could Charlotte refuse? Charlotte had never thought that she could attract such a top saint level by relying on the Hot Spring Mountain. Baraziher did not mention this matter again. Instead, he talked about some of his insights on the god level. Count Constantine was not stingy and told some of his insights. Charlotte occasionally mentioned Juno's notes or the knowledge in the Emerald Book, which also made the two top saint level feel that they had gained a lot. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 607 Assassination. The Holy Light God Country released by Charlotte was like opening a door to evil. Generals, nobles, and even people of some status from various countries came to visit one after another. Fortunately, when Charlotte designed the entertainment facilities, she used mathematics to calculate. It seems that everything is free, but in fact, each project has hidden charges. There are endless small traps to lure consumption. There are many kinds of card games. Players have wins and losses. The casino will never lose, so there will be no expenditure deficit due to hospitality problems. Every big lingmo is polite and gentle, with a tea smell that keeps people away from thousands of miles away, but as long as you give them a few gold iku, they will immediately call you brother charmingly. Well, these are all the tricks commonly used by online anchors in the world that Charlotte traveled through. Men on the old continent seem to like this too. Whether it is the officers under Charlotte, the generals of various countries, or even the two peak saints, they enjoy it very much. Well, from that day on, Count Constantine and Boraz never left the Holy Light God Country. On the 5th day after Charlotte arrived in Cher, Juno Arthur finally came back. He heard that Charlotte was here and went directly to the Holy Light Kingdom. Juno had lived on the Holy Light Kingdom for a long time and was familiar with it. He even had a familiar great lingmo. Constantine and Baraziher held a hot spring meeting for several days before inviting the Emperor of Brittany and Antonio. Except for Lanmaroc, the Count of Victorious Champagne, who was still in Britain and did not come to Cher, the top saints of the old continent gathered in such a complete manner for the first time. Charlotte was much more respectful to the Emperor of Brittany. After all, he was still the Duke of Fars, and the Emperor of Brittany was his old father-in-law. However, everyone who could participate in this meeting had an extraordinary status. Maclean Brittany had just become the emperor, and he was originally just the Count of Brittany, so no one showed restraint. Juno naturally served as the host of the meeting. He said, in the entire old world, there are only more than 10 people who are qualified to ascend to the god rank. Originally, we were all very proud of our research and were unwilling to show our research results to others easily, but now the situation is very different. Zimmerman has started a war of gods, and behind him are countless evil gods of the new world. As mortals, we will never be much stronger than ordinary people in such a war, so we need to unite as one. I will make my notes public. Baraziher also raised his hand and said, my research on the god rank is not in depth, but I will share my teacher's notes. Although Constantine and Brittany are also at the peak of the saint rank, they are obviously lagging behind in the research of the god rank, and Antonio has only been promoted to the 24th rank not long ago. The three of them could only express their agreement, even though Brittany was the Emperor of Fars. Charlotte pondered for a moment and said, I can also contribute the name of the Holy Light God, as well as some documents from the New World. Charlotte had asked Master Mani of the Emerald Library and obtained authorization, but he still had reservations, because sharing some knowledge might cause great panic, such as Zimmerman gave birth to a bunch of children to carry consciousness. This secret method cannot be tried by His Majesty Brittany, or the Fars Empire will collapse. It's strange to say that since Zimmerman's defeat and the evil god Tualading lost an incarnation, the army of the New World has fallen into silence and has not launched any more attacks. The peak saints of the old world were able to exchange their lifelong cultivation experience and exploration of the god level during this short interval of war. The people who gained the most from this were not Charlotte, but Juno and Borosir. Both of them were only half a step away from stepping into the god level, and they could even step into the god level as long as they wanted, but neither of them wanted to become an evil god who lost consciousness and had a broken soul, because that kind of godhood had no meaning for them. They want to become gods like the 9 true gods, with their own full consciousness and complete soul, and can keep everything human, instead of becoming some kind of monster. Charlotte is still far from the peak of the Holy Order, and all the gains will take a long time to digest. Charlotte stayed in Share City for more than 20 days. He originally wanted to gather the power of everyone and kill Zimmerman first, but with the holding of this peak Holy Order meeting, he gave up this idea. Because after he came into contact with these peak Holy Orders, he found one thing: they would never make a sacrifice to kill Zimmerman. Each of them has an extremely important responsibility, everyone has a lofty ideal, and everyone has an extraordinary status and is very important. To sacrifice to kill Zimmerman is simply to inlay a mobile phone case with diamonds. Realizing this, Charlotte accepted the title of the Holy Light God after this exchange came to an end, and said goodbye to the Emperor of Brittany, Antonio, Juno and others. Although he came to Share City this time, although he gained a lot, Charlotte was still very disappointed. He didn't even have the opportunity to bring up the matter of besieging Zimmerman. When Charlotte took away the Holy Light Kingdom, the entire city of Shell was obviously in a state of distress. On the way back, Charlotte was not so anxious. He kept hiding mirrors and passing trees, mountains, and caves. He had already mastered the mirror world of these mirrors. With these mirrors, Charlotte could expand his mirror world again. After dropping hundreds of mirrors in a row, Charlotte was slightly bored with this boring work. Just when he was about to take a break, he suddenly felt a crisis coming. He used the light agility technique and rushed forward. A rapier stabbed into the void. Charlotte was just here. If he hadn't suddenly rushed forward and dodged the sword, he would have been seriously injured. Charlotte took a deep breath and said, "Wood Brandon." An old man walked out of the void, smiled slightly, and said, "It's me. I set up dozens of magic mirrors here, waiting for you to return to Moldova, and then I would kill you, but I didn't expect your vigilance to become higher again. How did you dodge my sword just now?" Charlotte would not tell Wood Brandon that he had upgraded his insight to omniscience and had sensed the crisis of life and death. Charlotte shrugged and said, "This time, you have no chance to slip away." Charlotte pointed her finger, and the infinite mirror world was fully opened, trying to block Wood Brandon's retreat. The former Prime Minister of the Fars Empire clasped his hands together, and his infinite mirror world resisted Charlotte's invasion. Both of them were masters who practiced the secret methods of the Van Gogh clan. They both knew that they must not enter each other's mirror world. Last time, Wood Brandon relied on his hundreds of years of experience to invade Charlotte's mirror world, but he suffered a great loss. This time he would never make the same mistake again. Chapter 608, Information about the New World, the Evil Gods Expedition. Charlotte went back and forth in the mirror world, firstly to avoid Wood Brandon's hounds, and secondly to find the opponent's flaws. He also cultivated the spirit of the mirror to X4. Although he could not summon the hounds of the spirit world, he could skillfully control the cloud cats, the fear snakes, and the desire snakes of the spirit world. He was no longer helpless like last time. However, Wood Brandon refused to enter his mirror world. Even if Charlotte released the Holy Light Kingdom, it would be useless. He could not send this legendary warship into the opponent's mirror world. What if he was beaten by a meat bun? The extraordinary battle of the holy level did not allow carelessness. Wood Brandon did not expect that it had not been long before Charlotte could improve the infinite mirror world to such a level. While urging the mirror weapon to fight Charlotte, he used words to try to find the flaws in Charlotte's mind. Neither of them dared to enter the other's mirror world, and they chose to smash the other's magic mirror and destroy the other's entrance and exit to the mirror world. Wood Brandon soon realized that something was wrong. The mirror world was a limited world. The Van Gogh clan could only use the magic mirror to temporarily build a mirror world in the wilderness. He realized last time that Charlotte's mirror world was too vast, but he thought that Charlotte had mirror points in some cities. This time he chose a barren mountain because he thought it would not be connected to the rest of the mirror world. He could only use his magic mirror to temporarily build a mirror world. Although the strength of both sides would be reduced, he believed that Charlotte would be weakened more. However, After fighting with Charlotte for several hours, Wood-Brandon found that the other side's mirror world seemed to be extremely vast, and he couldn't help but feel horrified. Charlotte was also somewhat puzzled. He forced Wood-Brandon away with a sword and asked, "Why don't you ask Zimmerman to come and kill me together?" Wood-Brandon was shocked and even showed a little fear. Charlotte knew that something must have happened between him and Zimmerman. When she tried to find this loophole, Wood-Brandon refused to respond. The two fought for a day and a night. Wood-Brandon stood in his magic mirror, put away his rapier, turned into a tree branch, and sighed, "Charlotte Mecklen, I can't kill you anymore. Charlotte has the skill of lightness and the world in the mirror. She is the most difficult saint to kill." Charlotte shrugged slightly and said, "I'm not strong enough now, but even if I advance 1 or 2 levels, I still can't kill you. I don't know what level Wood-Brandon's mirror warrior has reached. Anyway, no matter how hard Charlotte tries, she can't find any flaws, and the opponent's speed is not slower than his." Although Charlotte knows that Wood-Brandon is just a reflection of his own lightness X-27, he is still helpless. He is also proficient in the infinite mirror world, and of course he knows how difficult it is to kill a member of the Van Gogh clan. Charlotte didn't dare to chase into the opponent's mirror world. Wood-Brandon can break through his mirror world and escape calmly, but Charlotte doesn't have this ability. If he rushes into the opponent's mirror world, he is likely to be trapped to death by Wood-Brandon. He said that he couldn't kill Wood-Brandon, which was also a truth. Wood-Brandon sighed and said, "It's a pity that I don't stand on the side of the old world, otherwise we could still shake hands and make peace." Charlotte couldn't help asking, "Why don't you stand on the side of Byron?" Wood-Brandon is a member of the Van Gogh clan, and Byron is the Empire of Vampires. He said that he would not stand on the side of the old world, which means that he did not choose Byron. This is very strange. Wood-Brandon smiled and said, "You have subdued Romeus and Adhala, so you should know that there are 5 peak saints in the New World." Charlotte nodded, then suddenly realized and said, "One of the peak saints of the blood ancestor is Wood-Brandon." Wood-Brandon shrugged and said, "The other one is Zimmerman, but he is not called that name in the New World." Charlotte now knew why Wood-Brandon would not stand with the Empire of the Old World. He was in the Peak of Fars before, but it might not be for Baron. Even the Crown Prince Morgan Axel, who had obviously gone to the New World, appeared in Fars again, and there might be some reason. The two of them had already decided to stop fighting, and neither could do anything to the other. As a famous wise man in this world, Wood-Brandon did not want to fight a meaningless battle again. Seeing Wood-Brandon turning around and about to disappear, Charlotte asked, "Who is the other top vampire?" Wood-Brandon turned around and whispered, "It could be a blood ancestor. I've guessed that he could be Karnstein, the ancestor god of the Adonis clan, or he could be one of the 19 descendants created by Pendragon through the first embrace. Zimmerman and I have both fought with him. We all lost." After saying this, Wood-Brandon disappeared into the magic mirror. Charlotte pondered for a moment and was about to continue on her way when suddenly a warning sign arose in her heart. She struggled to raise her body, and a magic dagger pierced out from her lower abdomen, almost ripping him open. Wood-Brandon's voice was heard in the air, "Sorry, I couldn't help but try it when I saw the angle was right. Please don't mind, Duke Mecklen." Charlotte used 7 or 8 big moves, but couldn't find Wood-Brandon. He couldn't help but secretly shouted, "Wait until I upgrade the mirror spirit again and summon the spirit hound. I guarantee that this old thing will have nowhere to escape." When he set off again this time, Wood-Brandon had no sign of life. When Charlotte returned to Moldova, he happened to encounter a war. More than a dozen tree gods commanded the plant army and crossed the mountains again, trying to invade Moldova. Charlotte released the Holy Light God Kingdom to ensure that the front line was as stable as Mount I. Amid the cheers of the crowd, he appeared in the sky. He was about to kill a few tree gods to give the Holy Light God Kingdom a meal, when he saw the body of a tree god suddenly split open and a heroic young man walked out. Charlotte could sense that the boy had the power of the evil god, and was definitely not an ordinary saint. He couldn't help but ask, "Who are you?" The boy stretched out his hand and a double-edged broadsword appeared in his hand. He said in a voice as if there was nothing to say, "Taladang." It was the first time that Charlotte had seen such a humane evil god. He was about to ridicule this evil god when he heard Amon's voice in his ear, "Dad, run away. Enter the Holy Light God Kingdom." Charlotte didn't hesitate and immediately went to the landing area. He saw a black mountain suddenly appear in the sky. Chapter 609 Who is Amon? This mountain was suspended in the sky, but it gave a heavy pressure to everyone on the ground. Charlotte landed on the Holy Light Kingdom and gave orders loudly, asking all his subordinates to withdraw from the battlefield. This battle was beyond the limit of what humans could achieve. Fortunately, Charlotte had been prepared and turned the military camp into a maze. As long as ordinary soldiers retreated into the military camp, they would be teleported away. More than a dozen saints rushed to the Holy Light Kingdom. An invisible evil god force field burst out, forming a dome-like shield. When the Black Mountain smashed down hard, the whole world seemed to shake. Charlotte couldn't stand and fell to the deck. He tried to enter that world and fight Tualadang with the power of the Holy Light Kingdom, but found that he couldn't get in. He hurriedly shouted, "Amen." "What's going on?" Amen was standing under the endless black sky, looking at the huge monkey carrying the Black Mountain on its shoulders, and couldn't help muttering, "Damn Zimmerman, he actually made Tualadang his son." If Charlotte was here, she would definitely drop her jaw in surprise when she heard this, but Charlotte was not here at this moment, so of course she couldn't hear this. Amen now returned to the appearance of an ordinary human child, without any extra organs on his body. He casually pulled out a knight's lance from the void and rushed into the sky. Amabella, Dapachirado, Yvonne, and Vasuji, the four women, seemed to be unable to see Amen and were still fighting hard. Amen disappeared into the Black Mountain carried by the black giant monkey. Charlotte suddenly found that he could enter that world again. He stepped into this world, but did not see Amen. He could not help asking, "Where's Amen?" Amabella, Dipakalaruo, Yvonne, and Vasuji asked in unison, "Who is Amen?" HL came from behind Charlotte, and he dared not ask any more. He looked at the blood rhinoceros. The grooves inlaid with Amen's power had undergone different changes. Originally, there were countless eyes, but now there was only one light golden eye. He could not help but release this power. The blood rhinoceros did not transform into a weapon, but Charlotte had an extra vertical pupil between his eyebrows. There was an extra strange power in his body, which repelled the evil power of Amabella, Dipakalaruo, Yvonne, and Vasuji, but this power seemed to be no less than the blessing of the original powers, which made Charlotte's power undergo earth-shaking changes. The first is the art of dexterity. 18 runes of the art of dexterity disappeared, but a new rune appeared, Winchi. Winchi is not faster than the art of dexterity x18, but it is more suitable for the saint level. It allows Charlotte to move forward and backward in the air more smoothly. The sluggish feeling of using the art of dexterity has completely disappeared. In addition to the transformation of the art of dexterity, the hand of flame and the blazing bomb have not transformed, but they have an additional change unification. Although the hand of flame is an attacking skill, it is mainly used to hold weapons. Although it is also quite tough, it is very easy to be broken in the saint-level battle, and it needs to be retrained before it can be restored. The 18 hands of flame are united, and their toughness is comparable to the extraordinary artifacts of the saint level. Moreover, they can become several meters in size, and can also be reduced to the size of a bug, which can play an unexpected role in battle. Needless to say, the blazing bomb has doubled its power after unification. Charlotte fired a super flaming bullet at the evil god Tualadang, blasting a hole in the body of the evil god. The power was incredible. Amabella looked at Charlotte who joined the battle, her face full of panic, and asked, "Why doesn't he accept my power? Is he angry? Is he blaming us for calling him over every time we encounter an enemy? What should I do?" Dipakalaruo, Yvonne, and Vasuji were also confused, because Charlotte did not accept their power either. Charlotte rushed into the endless black sky, and fired 7 flaming bullets at Tualadang's blasted body, blasting a deep passage in the body of this big black monkey. Facing the hole in the body of the evil god, Charlotte suddenly felt a desire in his heart. He followed that desire without hesitation and drilled into Tualadang's wound. Tualadang's wound was squirming and contracting, and was about to heal again. When Charlotte entered the wound, the flesh and blood around the wound suddenly turned into countless eyeballs. These eyeballs were born from Tualadang's flesh and blood, and tried their best to prevent the evil god's flesh and blood from healing. The two forces fought and were deadlocked for a while. Charlotte continued to go deeper into the body of the evil god. When she encountered obstacles, she fired an 18-in-1 flaming bomb. She didn't know where she went deep into the body of the evil god. Suddenly, she saw nothing in front of her eyes, and a huge hole appeared. In this hole, there are countless organs, but these organs don't look like the internal organs that humans usually grow, nor are they muscles and bones. Instead, they look like monsters. These monsters are constantly sending power to Tualadang. Charlotte suddenly felt that the whole world was shaking and seemed to be unstable. He made a prompt decision and grabbed 2 organs with both hands. He sent out the flaming hand and grabbed another organ. The next second, he was kicked out of this world by a powerful evil god. The young man who called himself Tuoladang chopped down with a knife. Charlotte was unwilling to resist and used wind chi to retreat a few hundred meters. He originally thought that this evil god kicked him out of that space and wanted to fight with him in reality, but he saw Tuoladang jump into the black mountain floating in the sky, and the whole black mountain flew away with a roar. Charlotte was floored and took a look at what he was holding in his hands. There was a small ring in his left hand, which seemed to be struggling to resist and struggle to get out. There was a small shield in his right hand, which was also shaking, as if he was unwilling to surrender. Charlotte landed on the Holy Light God's kingdom, dropped the 2 objects, and summoned the Hand of Flame. The Hand of Flame was holding a rapier, which was blood red. He also dropped the rapier that he had taken from the evil god's body. The 3 objects landed on the deck of the Holy Light God's kingdom and were swallowed up in an instant. Although Charlotte knew that these 3 objects must have some sayings, he could not subdue them at all, and could only serve as food for the Holy Light God's kingdom. After a while, he sensed that the Holy Light God's kingdom was in another world and withdrew from the battle. He asked carefully, "Do you remember who Amin is?" Amabella's voice was full of surprise, and she shouted, "Charlotte Mecklen, are you crazy? Amin is my child and yours, why don't you remember?" Charlotte was speechless. This world is broken. Chapter 610 When will the day without war come? The direct victory over an evil god made the warriors of the Knights of Favonius cheer loudly. Although Charlotte had defeated Ishamlan and Agmiras in the expedition to the Agulhas Sea, his main combat power was the fleet. Now Modova's army was the army. Although the concept of arms had not yet been born in the old world, Charlotte did not divide the Knights of Favonius into different arms, but in fact they were still different troops. Most of the lower-level soldiers in this expedition to Modova had never seen such a big scene. Charlotte unlocked the blood spirit, and his strength dropped sharply, but what surprised him was that whether it was Feng Qi or Hei, these 2 abilities did not change at all. The Feng Qi rune was still Feng Qi, and it did not dissolve and turn into 18 light and agile spells. He could still combine the 18 runes of the Burning Hand into a Super Burning Hand, and the same was true for the rune of the Blazing Balm. After this, he knew that not every rune can be transformed, and the transformation of some runes may require a very secret ceremony or special secret method, and it is not a natural transformation. He took an unusual path, which is definitely different from the normal rune transformation. When Charlotte was preparing, she asked her teacher Juno. In fact, wood Brandon is also a good consulting object. He learned the practice secret method of repeatedly condensing low-level runes from wood Brandon. Of course, Charlotte believes that Farazher can also answer some of her questions. On the contrary, the ancient alchemists of the Emerald Library are not very familiar with this kind of combat secret method. After all, although they are powerful, they are almost not combat talents, and there is no such little experience in the Emerald Library. The soldiers of the Knights of Favonius began to clean up the battlefield very skillfully, and moved the fallen tree gods and those plant-like soldiers one by one to the Holy Light Kingdom, allowing this legendary battleship to devour them. The Holy Light God Kingdom is now a totem-like existence in the Knights of Favonius. It seems that as long as it exists, it will be invincible. Moreover, this legendary warship can also provide the most extreme enjoyment in the world. Anyone who has boarded the Holy Light God Kingdom will praise it. Charlotte returned to Modova and repelled an invasion of the evil god, and the war entered a stagnation period again. More than 10 days later, an uninvited guest came to Modova, and he also brought hundreds of veterans. Charlotte was very surprised to see Hughes. He almost forgot about this group of veterans of the Yugoslav Restoration Army. Anyway, if they were willing to come to Modova, they would naturally be given corresponding identities and dispersed to integrate into different countries. But if they were unwilling to come, he had no choice. Could he force these people? But Hughes personally sent people over, and he could only accept them with a pinch of his nose. Charlotte said to Hughes, "You really made it difficult for me." Hughes looked very tired, and said, "I have to keep them alive." This time, Charlotte went with Hughes to face this group of veterans of the Yugoslav Restoration Army. The hatred of these veterans weakened a little, but some still muttered, "I will never fight for the Mecklen family." Charlotte raised her hand and said, "The Yugoslav territory has been occupied by the New World Congress and changed into a free zone of the New World Congress. If you are willing to go back, I will arrange it and distribute houses and land. It's just that although they are nominally loyal to the Mecklen family, I have no control over them. You will have to wait a long time for your houses and land, and they may also be withheld. If you want to get the land immediately, I can send you to my new territory. Because it is new land that has not been cultivated, everyone can get more than 3 times the land in a batch of supplies. Those who are willing to go to the New World Congress Free Zone stand on my left, and those who are willing to go to the new territory stand on my right. In my new territory, I can let Hughes supervise the distribution of land and guarantee the benefits. No matter which choice you make, it can be changed at any time. Please make your choice. Most of the veterans chose to return to South Seraph. After all, it was their home, but some people wanted to see what the new land was like. Charlotte certainly refused to let Hughes go and let him accompany these veterans to settle down. Anyway, the original capital of Moldova, Liguria. The current Berdini castle has long been a maze, and it is very convenient to go to the city under his rule. This resettlement activity lasted for 7 or 8 days, and almost all the veterans who had chosen to go to the New World Congress Free Zone regretted it. Because after Charlotte's constant tossing, most of the South Seraphs were taken to other places and had a better life. There were not many South Seraphs left in the New World Congress Free Zone, and most of the land and houses here were destroyed by the war, and there were no empty houses and land to be distributed. Moreover, the New World Congress had long been instructed by Charlotte, and was not friendly to these Yugoslav veterans. Almost no one could get the land and houses issued, and these returning veterans could not even guarantee their basic living. In contrast, the Argelsea Islands were full of reclamation groups. Charlotte had sent hundreds of thousands of people there, and they had already formed a scale. Moreover, maze-like cities were built on these islands, and they had their own fleets. They were not isolated and the travel was quite convenient. Moreover, as long as they were willing to stay, they would indeed be issued land. As for houses, they could only build them themselves. Well, in fact, Charlotte had always given the people under his rule land and houses for free, but he stole the concept of modernization. These lands and houses were free of charge for the right to use, not the ownership. A small amount of rent was collected every year, and there would be different degrees of preferential treatment for a one-time payment of 5, 10, 20, or even 70 years. There was no tax in Charlotte's territory, but this kind of hidden income was not small. Despite this, the people in his territory still had a very low living burden. Hughes didn't stay long. After most of the veterans of the Restoration Army were settled, he left in a hurry. The hatred between him and Charlotte could not be resolved, so he could only forget it. Charlotte knew that this most outstanding young man in South Seraph would soon become a vampire, integrate into Byron, and erase the last trace of South Seraph on his body. South Seraph, the free territory of Fars with a strong rebellious spirit, will erase its traces from the old world just like Behemoth. The South Seraph people will never fall into war again, just like the Behemoth people will soon forget that their former ruler was the Grand Duke, and they are used to being a direct jurisdiction of the empire, and they are used to not having to pay taxes to the Duke, but only having to face the officials sent by the empire. This war has greatly changed the old world, but every country and every citizen in the old world has not had time to reflect on it. They are all longing for peace. No one knows when the day without war will come. Will it come? Chapter 611, The Aftermath of the Gods' War. Hughes emerged from the blood pool little by little. He had condensed his blood core and became a member of the Aberlohan clan, one of the 6 royal families of vampires. Reincarnation into Blood Clan allowed Hughes to make a breakthrough in his strength and successfully promoted to the 20th level. The Flesh and Blood Furnace and Golden Requiem that he practiced were originally the secrets of the Aberlohan clan. After reincarnation into Blood Clan, he became a core member of the Aberlohan clan and was no longer an outsider. An elder of the Aberlohan clan smiled and said, "Congratulations, Hughes. You will become a member of the Aberlohan clan in the future. The Elders' Council is already reviewing your qualifications. Later this year, you will definitely become a member of the Elders' Council of the Aberlohan clan. However, choosing the secret track is still too dangerous. In fact, the first embrace is safer," Hughes said lightly. "I like the secret track. As we all know, vampires have no reproductive ability and can only be transformed into new vampires through secret rituals or the first embrace. If Zeus chooses the first embrace, he will have a blood relative who can control everything about him, from birth to death, and even his daily life. Although the secret ritual is dangerous, almost all strong people will choose it when they join the blood clan, including Count Constantine and Grand Duchess Misu. Almost all blood clans covet such a strong person. If they can become the blood relative of such a strong person, not only will their status in the clan be improved, but also because they control a newly born vampire strongman, their power will become stronger. The elder of the Abulahan clan sighed slightly. He was also one of the people who coveted Zeus. If he could become Zeus's blood relative, he would get endless benefits. Zeus's strength is obvious to all. Almost everyone believes that he has the opportunity to become a big man in the saint stage. Hughes walked out of the blood pool step by step. The thick blood plasma on his body slid to the ground naturally. There was no trace left on his body. This was the power of the flesh and blood furnace. He could almost completely control the muscles of his whole body and bounce off the blood on his body. It was just a small test. In terms of pure hand-to-hand combat, there was no extraordinary way to compare with the secret method of the Abulahan clan. He grabbed in the air, and a white robe fell down, covering his muscular and flawless body. Just as Hughes grabbed his knight's spear, the elder of the Abulahan clan suddenly made a panicked voice and shouted, "Why are you here?" Hughes looked up and saw Juno Arthur, who was considered the #1 figure in the blood clan. The strongest of the vampires came with a smile and said, "Welcome aboard," Hughes said lightly. "Are you here for Charlotte?" Juno Arthur smiled and said, "Of course I hope this student can become a vampire, but he is not a vampire yet, and you are already a member of the Abulahan clan, so I will not favor Charlotte." "I heard that you still want to challenge Charlotte," Hughes said in a calm tone. "Jonathan is my teacher, my adoptive father, and my only elder. Because of his guidance, I am where I am today. I can give up the Yugoslav Restoration Army, but I will never give up this hatred." Juno Arthur nodded and said, "You probably can't learn Arthur's secret method. But you should have no problem learning Arthur's gunmanship. I once taught Zimmerman and Charlotte Mecklen Arthur's gunfighting skills, and they all benefited a lot from it and grew. I hope you can learn Arthur's gunfighting skills from me in the days to come. I even prepared a small gift for you." Juno clapped his hands, and a beautiful blood slave brought a tray. In the tray was a holy level pistol, but it was much longer than an ordinary pistol, with a thick barrel and a thick handle. It was silver and had hammered patterns, which made it look rough and powerful. Juno said, "This thunderbolt is a relic of an old friend. I asked someone to make improvements. It can fire magic armor breaking bombs and blood energy bullets. It can also provide X6 light agility and X7 spirit spider skills." Zeus was silent for a long time, knelt on one knee, and said, "Teacher Juno, I will definitely go all out to learn the gun-fighting technique." Juno smiled and said, "You young people should be the future of the blood clan." The two of them left gracefully, leaving the elders of the Abulahan clan with a look of loss. Charlotte later learned about this from Juno's letter. He could understand Juno, because Juno was a vampire after all, and it was his unshirkable task to cultivate new blood for the vampires. Otherwise, Juno would not have created Arthur's gun-fighting technique, a secret method that any vampire, even any extraordinary person, could practice. He was not afraid of Zeus either. Even though Zeus had learned gun-fighting techniques and obtained a holy-level extraordinary firearm, it was nothing to Charlotte. Charlotte was about to break through the 22nd level. With his spirituality, talent, and secret method of cultivation, once he broke through to the 22nd level, he could even compete with Zimmerman, so he was naturally not afraid of Zeus. A few days after Charlotte received the letter, another batch of land battleships and centurions were sent from Mecklenburg. He had not fought in Moldova for a long time, and he didn't know how Zimmerman would want to fight this war next. But Charlotte knew that the outcome of this war would be decided by the battle between the 9 righteous gods and the evil gods. The war in the human world was only the aftermath of the war between the gods. The battle between Moldova and Share City was relatively calm now, which was not a good thing. It meant that the evil gods were nurturing a new force. So after taking over a new batch of land battleships and centurions, Charlotte planned to launch a counterattack, crossing the Ganges Mountains and attacking Parmas on the other side of the mountain. After a brief mobilization, he led his holy ranks and crossed the Ganges Mountains. The Ganges Mountains were already full of plant-like evil warriors. Although Charlotte wanted to clean up these evil warriors, it was also a very troublesome job for him, and the efficiency was not proportional. Charlotte chose the small city of Danube in Parmas near the Ganges Mountains. Although he did not lead any ordinary soldiers, the combat power of more than 10 saints was enough to crush any resistance. There was only one tree god in Danube, and he was smashed from the sky by Ogon's hammer just after the battle began, and directly became the rations of the Holy Light Kingdom. As for the plant warriors in the city, it only took one day to be cleaned up. After Charlotte turned this small city into a maze, a large number of Favonius knights were soon teleported from Brittany Castle. Charlotte quickly took over 6 cities in Parmas and did not even encounter any decent resistance. Chapter 612 Destiny God System. When the Knights of Favonius attacked the 7th city of Parmas, they encountered a problem. Charlotte could see the Black Mountain, which was steadily suspended above the city, emitting an evil aura. Similarly, the great evil god Tualating also discovered the Knights of Favonius. He transformed into a young man and walked out of the Black Mountain. Although Charlotte repelled Tualating last time, it was obviously not a real defeat. Tualating suffered heavy losses last time and his strength was seriously damaged. He also feared Charlotte. The two sides confronted each other for a while. Tualating stretched out his hand and waved. The Black Mountain rumbled and floated several kilometers behind. Charlotte felt slightly amused. He did not expect that this evil god would actually give in. Charlotte did not pursue and occupy the city. He did not continue to expand the results of the battle. Instead, he built a maze-like city chain on one side of Mount Gangdis to form a line of defense. At the same time, the cleanup of Mount Gangdis began. However, after doing all these things, Charlotte was always uneasy. He thought deeply for a few days and decided to build a large temple of the Serpent of Fate on Mount Gangdis. Charlotte chose a location on both sides of the mountain and led his holy orders to start digging a passage through the entire mountain. The new temple of the Serpent of Fate would span the entire Gangdis mountain range and be connected inside, like a miracle. No one understood why Charlotte suddenly wanted to dig such a large project. But his men had so much confidence in the Duke that although some people had doubts, no one openly opposed it. Less than 10 days after the tunnel was dug, it encountered a cave in the belly of the mountain. In the following projects, similar caves were encountered continuously, causing the progress of the siege to advance by leaps and bounds, 10 times faster than expected. In less than a month, this corridor has penetrated the Gangdis Mountains. As for the building complexes at both ends, they have begun to take shape. Charlotte has also built various holiday villas, mountain villas, casinos, hot springs, commercial blocks, shopping centers around the Temple of the Serpent of Fate according to the model of the Holy Light God Kingdom and Hot Spring Mountain. Well, there are also the Great Limbus born in Dapakilato. Although the Holy Light God Kingdom is a huge legendary worship, the flow of people it can accommodate is still limited, resulting in many low-level soldiers of the Knights of Favonius having no chance to board and see it. But the Temple of the Serpent of Fate in the Gangdis Mountains is huge, more than 100 times larger than the Holy Light God Kingdom. Although the facilities are not perfect for the time being, it can accommodate more people to consume and play. On the day when this huge Temple of the Serpent of Fate was completed, Charlotte brought all the saints and climbed the large altar on the top of the mountain. A brilliant light fell from the sky, and everyone received a different share of the joy of fate. Even 3 saints were upgraded on the spot. The former Grand Master of the Far's Royal Knights, one of the 3 heroes and 5 strongest of Fars, and nicknamed the Holy Mountain of Light, Crester. He was directly promoted to the 24th level. The second person to be promoted was Ogon, the first genius of the orcs. He had already broken through the 23rd level and was promoted again, becoming another peak saint level under Charlotte. Well, it's a pity that Ogon, even if he was promoted to the peak saint level, he was not the only one under Charlotte. He is always half a step behind. The third person to be promoted was Andreas, who was promoted to the 21st level, which made the former youngest saint level of the former Black Phoenix excited to the point of being unable to control himself. Originally, because of the hard work of building the temple, the saint levels were ecstatic and praised Charlotte endlessly. The little complaints earlier disappeared. As for the ordinary soldiers of the Knights of Favonius, as the various entertainment facilities of Mount Gangdis were completed and open to them, they also deeply praised the greatness of Duke Mecklen. Charlotte held a grand event during the day, and at night, she was alone in the hot spring pool of the mountaintop villa she built for herself, soaking in it to dispel her recent mental fatigue. He actually had a vague premonition, so he suddenly tried his best to build this huge temple, but after the construction was completed, he still felt a little unsettled, and he always felt that something was missing. Just as Charlotte was relaxing herself and trying to relieve her mental fatigue, Hermes' voice rang out, like the breeze at night, saying, "Thank Duke Mecklen." I now have one more place to move around. Charlotte opened her eyes and saw Hermes in a paper black suit. He smiled slightly and said, "Teacher Hermes, it's great to have you guarding the Ganges Mountains." Well, he also did a little pool for this ancient alchemy master. With him appearing near this temple, I believe that even Tualadan can no longer easily cross it. Hermes pulled at the air and a chair appeared. He said, "One more thing. I saw the Serpent of Fate." Charlotte jumped in shock and felt that the hot spring was no longer warm. Hermes smiled lightly and said, "I also met the God of Joy. Thank you for helping me design a colleague." Charlotte said embarrassedly, "What did the Serpent of Fate say?" A young man's voice came over with joy, saying, "Sir Mecklin, you actually thought of using this method to enhance my strength? It is really commendable. I am willing to lend you 50 copies of the Joy of Destiny. You can use them with confidence." Charlotte was shocked and was about to say, "Why has the debt increased?" She heard the Serpent of Fate say, "I need servant gods, but the minimum standard must be the peak holy rank. You should get all the ancient alchemists in the Emerald Library under my command. The battle on my side is getting more and more intense." Charlotte had no time to complain. He knew very well that he and the Serpent of Fate were deeply bound. Once this righteous god fell, he would be eaten up by the evil gods. He did not hesitate at all and said, "I will discuss with the teachers of the Emerald Library and try to get them to serve you voluntarily." A silver snake tail passed through the void, patted Charlotte's body twice, and then retracted, without any movement. Hermes smiled slightly and said, "I will also follow my lord to the battlefield, but I will still often appear in all casinos and entertainment venues. Duke Mecklin, thank you for everything you have done." Hermes also disappeared into the air. After a long time, Charlotte suddenly remembered something and thought to herself, "If I give all the ancient alchemists to the Serpent of Fate as subordinates, doesn't it mean, has this world finally changed from the 9 gods to the god system? How can each individual god defeat the god system in groups? Did I give birth to something terrible?" Chapter 613 Anne of Brittany, Goddess of the Calendar. Master Mani. Are you willing to become the god of knowledge and wisdom? I am. Master Kabbalah. I am. Well, I haven't said it yet. It doesn't matter. I am willing. Charlotte received unprecedented support in the Emerald Library. Although he was not a real online writer, and Mecklin's novels were all copied from famous works, online articles and legends in another world, but it was not difficult to come up with dozens or even hundreds of titles for gods. After all, he didn't need originality. This recruitment of volunteers was a great success. Almost all ancient alchemists envied Hermes and hoped that they could have the same freedom as Hermes. Although the Emerald Library had endless wisdom, it was too empty and lonely. Moreover, there were almost no females in the alchemist industry, which led to almost all middle-aged and elderly men here. The boring life was explosively raised to a higher level. Even being able to go out was already a great desire, and they could also become servant gods of the Serpent of Fate. It was simply the world that all ancient alchemists dreamed of. Although becoming a servant god would make them constrained and fundamentally different from a true god, who would be willing to refuse? However, cramming so many gods at once would cause a quality avalanche in the creation of the novel. Charlotte didn't really know how to write a novel, so he could only hope that the quick-handed clerk summoned by Anne would be able to perform exceptionally after so many years of novel creation this time and round up those plot loopholes that he couldn't figure out how to round up no matter how hard he tried. In order to make his quick-handed clerks work hard, he directly summoned the quick-handed clerks scattered all over the country to Moldova one by one and arranged them in the most beautiful place of the Temple of the Serpent of Fate in Mount Yangdis. All entertainment facilities were free and open, and each person was equipped with an exclusive great lingmo, and they were even allowed to change once a month. Charlotte could only hope that they would be able to write a new work under the divine glory of the Serpent of Fate. However, this work did not progress smoothly. With Charlotte personally reviewing the manuscript, the progress of the new version of the novel has been very slow, and most of the rewrites were not satisfactory. About 10 days later, a novel passed the review, was reprinted and released, and successfully introduced 3 new gods. The only thing that comforted Charlotte was that, including Hermes, plus the 3 new gods, also joined the rewriting of the novel after receiving the Oracle of the Serpent of Fate. Well, what Charlotte couldn't understand was that the rewriting on his side was not very smooth. However, a large number of fan works created by a new author from Ingrama appeared on the market. This author, whose pen name is Snake, has a mysterious origin and no one knows his true identity, but the works he created are of high quality. Charlotte later simply published the works of this author directly. Anyway, if he showed up and asked for the copyright, she would let Princess May send it to Moldova, and Charlotte would personally negotiate with him in a friendly manner. If the other party did not show up, she would first accumulate the royalties until someone claimed it. Charlotte even prepared a compensation. With Anne Mecklen's new book and the publication of a large number of fanfictions by Snake, the Temple of the Snake of Fate in the Ganges Mountains has been glowing with divine light since some day. Soon, the divine light has become thicker and thicker, and gradually it has almost covered the entire Ganges Mountains. The Temple of the Snake of Fate, which was built by digging a section of the Ganges Mountains, has sculptures of gods one after another when no one noticed it. Before anyone knew it, countless statues of gods were everywhere in the temple. Even in the resort area near the temple, there are statues, reliefs, and murals of illusions of the new gods. Things named after these gods make them more and more present. All this reached its peak after the appearance of the new calendar god Anne Breton. Although the old world had a rough calendar, it was not complete. Although Charlotte was not good at the calendar, he was a math teacher after all, and the essence of the calendar was astronomy and mathematics. The ancient alchemists were very good at astronomy. Charlotte occasionally thought about whether he should arrange a priesthood for himself and Anne. Although he knew that this concept of priesthood had some problems, Anne was just a low-level transcendent. No matter how grand the concept he arranged for Anne could not become a god, but he still couldn't help designing this priesthood. When Charlotte compiled the first calendar of the old world, he stipulated that the first day of each year was Anne's day and the last day was Charlotte's day. He also arranged a memorial day for each member of the Fate Snake god system. Of course, the biggest festival of the year was reserved for the Fate Snake, which was arranged in the fall so that there would be enough harvests to hold a grand celebration, and the Fate Snake occupied it for half a month. He also stipulated in the calendar that the gods would be replaced every 100 years, and each era would have a presiding god, but the celebration day of the Fate Snake would always occupy the most important day of each era. As a person from an ancient Oriental country, Charlotte added a lot of information related to agricultural planting in this calendar, and also compiled every illusion, legend, celebrity birthday and death anniversary, and various folk stories in the Old World. This calendar can be called the Encyclopedia of the Old World. When the calendar was compiled, Charlotte saw the most brilliant divine light in her life. The Temple of the Serpent of Fate welcomed her, the greatest favor of the Serpent of Fate. The divine light that penetrated the heavens and the earth gradually faded after 3 days. Only Charlotte knew that the divine light was almost poured into the Emerald Book. This alchemical artifact made by Master Mania had undergone a transformation from the inside out. Charlotte also watched it, and under her gaze, it transformed from a saint-level extraordinary artifact to a god-level extraordinary artifact, and rose slowly and disappeared into the void. He even heard the voice of the Destiny Serpent when the divine light was at its most blazing. The little snake's voice was a little surprised, but more cautious. It said to him, "I'm sorry. The importance of the Emerald Book to me has surpassed everything. It is the cornerstone of the Destiny God system, so I can only take it away. However, as a reward, I will give you the Emerald Book, from now on." The Mecklen family is the priest bloodline designated by the Destiny Serpent. Only the bloodline descendants of Lord Mecklen and Anne of Brittany can become the High Priest of the Temple of Destiny. This promise is hereditary and will never change. When the divine light covering the hilly mountains dissipated, Charlotte had an extra Emerald Book in her hand. Yes, the Destiny Serpent used his own artifact to exchange for the Emerald Book. Yes, although this artifact is called the Emerald Book, it is actually an emerald stone. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 614 Jade Book. In the Duke's mansion of Mecklenburg, Belissa opened her hands slightly on both sides of her body, and lifted them lightly, and walked dozens of steps in front of the ladies in the palace with small steps, elegant and light. After demonstrating, she said softly, "You are all the first batch of ladies in the Duke's mansion of Mecklenburg. Please be sure to maintain etiquette." Belissa, as a lady who had served 3 dukes, automatically became the housekeeper of the Duke's mansion after Mecklenburg changed its name. She was teaching the new ladies. Although Sister Karen was also good at these, Sister Karen served Duchess Anne of Brittany, not the Duke of Mecklenburg's mansion team. Belissa never thought that the authentic etiquette she learned from the training of the Duchess of Behemoth would be put to good use one day. As the most useless extraordinary person under Charlotte. Well, Miss Belissa actually enjoyed such a life, managing a ducal mansion and being the Duchess's. Well, okay. The wife of the Duke of Mecklen is often not in Mecklenburg. But she is indeed the person Anne trusts the most when she is in Mecklenburg. Because Miss Belissa is not a threat at all. Belissa is very considerate of these female officers. She only let everyone practice for an hour and then let them rest. She wiped the sweat from her forehead and couldn't help but mutter to herself, every day is a war. When will the war disappear? It's a pity that I can no longer follow the Duke of Mecklen and help him. I will manage the Duke's mansion well. Belissa waved her little fist to show her determination, and a female officer hurried over and said, Miss Dorothy and Miss Anastasia are here. Belissa hurriedly trotted out and soon met her two friends. Dorothy, Anastasia, Belissa, are a very close group in the Knights of Favonius. Well, if it is normal, they may be called the three goddesses of Favonius. But all of Charlotte's subordinates know one thing, there is only one goddess of Favonius in the world, and that is Anne of Brittany. Even the gorgeous university where Anne graduated has permanently cancelled the selection of the West Wind goddess. After Charlotte had more and more saints under her, she would no longer take her old subordinates to fight, but assign them to key departments to take charge of government affairs and local management. However, Charlotte did not have many old and trustworthy people, so these people were often transferred and moved from one place to another. Charlotte had already given up Machupi, and sent the fast-handed clerk Italo Calvino, the author of Charlotte's biography, to manage it, and transferred Dorothy and Anastasia, who were stationed in Machupi all year round, back to Mecklenburg. Dorothy will become the highest administrative chief of Mecklenburg, and Anastasia will become the highest commander of Mecklenburg's patrol army. The three girls were very happy when they met. The three asked the kitchen of the Duke's mansion to prepare afternoon tea and chatted happily for a while. Anastasia said, the Duke is going to war. The old world is at war, but our Duchy of Mecklen is quiet. I hope this kind of life can continue. Since Charlotte returned, defeated the New World Congress, and recovered the territory, the Duchy of Mecklen has been peaceful and life is getting better and better. However, this war involves the evil god, and the three girls don't know what the future will be like. While they were chatting, suddenly a divine light fell from the sky and landed on the Temple of the Serpent of Fate in the city. The three girls were surprised together. Anastasia said, let's take a look. Belissa immediately ordered to prepare a carriage. In Charlotte's absence, the Duke's mansion had the greatest power and could dispose of resources at will. The three of them took a carriage and soon arrived at the temple. They saw countless phantoms flying in the divine light above the temple. This divine light took half a day to dissipate. When the divine light dissipated, the whole temple was different. Countless sculptures, murals, and decorations appeared. After entering the temple, the mood will be particularly peaceful, which is different from before. Belissa was surprised and asked, what's going on? Should we report it to the Duke? Dorothy and Anastasia didn't know what happened either, and they agreed with Belissa's opinion to report the matter to Charlotte. Almost at the same time, the Serpent of Fate in the Duchy of Mecklen had some strange signs. Although the managers of various places in the Duchy of Mecklen reported the matter, the response they received was very flat. Charlotte told everyone not to care about it and said that nothing had happened. Even the high-ranking members of the Knights of Favonius and Moldova didn't understand what had happened. Only Charlotte understood that she seemed to have caused a big incident. Although he lost the Emerald Book and could no longer enter and exit the Emerald Library at will, he got the Emerald Book in exchange. This must be a big profit. Charlotte has been studying the Jade Book during this period. Simply put, the Jade Book is a prototype of the Kingdom of God. The Jade Secret Scroll is indeed a copy of the Jade Book. It is very similar in function and everything else. However, this time, the Serpent of Fate values the Jade Secret Scroll more and even gave up the Jade Book. The Jade Book is also an extremely vast space, but there is no vitality in it. It is empty and there are no living creatures. Although the Serpent of Fate created the Jade Book, it is obvious that because the conception is not perfect, the Jade Book is still a prototype and has not yet formed a complete function. This is also the fundamental reason why the Serpent of Fate gave it to Charlotte. After studying the Jade Book for a few days, Charlotte understood part of its function. He and the Serpent of Fate were fundamentally different, and their ideas were also different. The Serpent of Fate wanted to use the Jade Book to make further progress, but Charlotte found that this was simply the best place to build an alchemy workshop. In the Jade Book, Forging any alchemy supernatural objects would have a lucky probability bonus, which would increase the workshop's yield rate and reduce the defective rate. It can be carried with you. The nature of the divine supernatural objects makes the Jade Book almost indestructible. Moreover, the space is large enough to arrange at least hundreds of production lines. Even if all the alchemy workshops on the continent are invested in it, it will still only fill up 1 or 2%. The Jade Book was actually originally a divine artifact created for alchemy, but the Serpent of Fate had never conceived it. The direction of this artifact, it fell into Charlotte's hands, and it would naturally be developed. It turned out that the Serpent of Fate could not think of a function. Ever since the creation of the new calendar, Charlotte had a vague feeling that a certain era of evil gods that was about to appear would never appear. Chapter 615 Let him become a part of me. In the Christopher region of the New World, suddenly everyone felt the entire land shaking, and then most residents of this region saw a doomsday-like scene. A monster that looked like a meatball but had countless tentacles and was dozens of kilometers long slowly rose into the sky. Most extraordinary people, or people with certain knowledge and experience, couldn't help but blurt out and yelled, "Evil God Gompers!" In another region of the New World, there was a similar vision. A pool of black mud like a swamp slowly emerged from the ground and crawled towards the sea. Wherever it passed along the way, no matter what it was, it would be sucked into the black mud. When it finally sank into the sea, it eroded a long river channel on the ground, causing seawater to flow back and form a saltwater river. There were 8 strange signs in the entire New World. Countless wild beasts and livestock gathered in one place and continued to rot, forming a foul-smelling mass of bones, mud, flesh, decay, and indescribable things. There was also floating gray fog, in which countless human figures swayed. Without exception, they all rushed into the sea and never looked back, heading straight for the old world. The residents of the New World had no idea what was happening, nor did they know whether these evil gods would return. They all lived in fear, while the residents of the old world knew nothing and did not know that danger was coming. A middle-aged man dressed as a traveler, carrying a suitcase, was walking in a city in the New World. Suddenly, he felt a sense of the whole world. He looked up at the sea and couldn't help showing a surprised expression. He said to himself, "Why did these trash suddenly go crazy? Why did they go to the old world? Well, should I go back to the old world too? There is no chance to become a god here. Although I killed 2 evil gods and absorbed their power, it is not that helpful in solving the fundamental problem." The middle-aged man suddenly felt a little sense. He looked at one end of the street and saw a familiar figure. He smiled and said, "Shouldn't you be in the old world?" The figure walked over slowly and said, "The righteous gods in the old world are very capable and have completely turned the tide of the war." The new person who appeared was Zimmerman. He had not appeared on the battlefield for a long time, and no one knew that he had returned to the New World. Zimmerman asked curiously, "Should I call you Karnstein or Gary Potter?" The middle-aged man carrying the suitcase hesitated for a moment, then smiled and said, "There is no need to hide it anymore. Both of them are me." Zimmerman was surprised and said, "Aren't you already a god?" Karnstein said calmly, "I couldn't keep my consciousness, nor could I keep my soul." "If you call that thing a god, then it can be considered a god." Zimmerman showed an unbelievable look and said, "Aren't you very normal now?" "I have never seen an evil god as normal as you," Karnstein said calmly. "Just as humans can give birth to offspring and allow a mass of flesh and blood to produce a new consciousness, I also used some secret method to allow a seed of consciousness to be born in my own body. Although this seed of consciousness has absorbed Gary Potter's memory, in every sense, we are 2 people." He pointed at his head and smiled. "Isn't it funny? I often think that I am Gary Potter. But I know clearly that I am a newly born consciousness that has only absorbed Gary Potter's memories. We are completely different individuals. The cognition of self has always troubled me." Zimmerman was silent for a moment, and whispered, "It turns out that the blood race has this secret method." "No wonder." He said nothing. "Some information is not suitable to be reported to non-friendly forces." He and Karnstein are not enemies, but they are definitely not friends. These secrets cannot be shared. Karnstein didn't care either. Of course, he knew who Zimmerman was. He and Zimmerman had fought countless times in the New World, and neither could do anything to the other. One was a serious evil god with a clear consciousness, and the other retained consciousness and was stepping into the right god. Even among the evil gods, they were the most terrifying. Karnstein said slowly, "You are not someone who will give up. What exactly are you going to do when you return to the New World?" Zimmerman smiled and said, It's similar to the reason why you stayed in the New World. We all need to find a few lone evil gods to kill and prepare enough food for ourselves. Karnstein asked, "Who are you targeting this time?" Zimmerman did not answer, but just passed by Karnstein and whispered, "It won't be you anyway." Karnstein was not surprised. The two had fought each other, and everyone knew that it was a bit difficult to kill each other. They would rather pick an easy target. Zimmerman disappeared in the long street. Karnstein looked up at the sky slightly. He could sense that 8 evil gods had left the New World. He stood on the street for a long time before saying lightly, "I should go back, go kill the dirty thing in the original body and make him a part of me." Bullshit blood ancestor, just a bunch of garbage. A faint blood mist emerged from Karnstein's body and then disappeared in the blood mist. Charlotte suddenly woke up, but he was shocked to find that he was not on the real world. He was pulled into the space of the gods by a force. The most typical feature here is the endless black sky. And there are often things that emit evil thoughts passing by, but every time Charlotte sees it, it is a battle between evil gods, so the battlefield will instinctively reject the same kind, so he rarely encounters evil gods. But this time is different. Under the endless black sky, there is no holy light god country, nor Emilia. He is alone. Charlotte heard a familiar murmur. This voice is so familiar that he thought he had never heard it before, but soon realized that it was deeply rooted in his soul. It was the voice of Karnstein. "Someone wants to kill me. All my descendants. Come to worship Rune's Hoddingleen Mountain. I will give you immortal life. Come to Hoddingleen Mountain." Charlotte summoned Karnstein and had a second meeting with this evil god because of Agneres's oil painting. Well, it was very unpleasant. But he was also very familiar with Karnstein's aura because of this. Charlotte could sense that in a distant place, there was a familiar aura, which was surging and incredibly powerful, even more powerful than any evil god he had seen, but it exuded an aura of decay, death, decline, and impending destruction. He was summoning all bloodlines, but Charlotte could sense that there was a very strange force blocking Karnstein's summons. In other words, only he could hear the summons of this evil god. Chapter 616 Transformation, Ultimate Transfiguration. Charlotte pondered for a while, and did not choose to leave. Instead, she gently stroked the blood spirit and activated Amon's power again. When the vertical eye between the eyebrows opened, Feng Chi's speed was full, and Charlotte's figure turned into a meteor, sweeping across the endless black sky. Charlotte had tried it before. Feng Chi was more bizarre under the black sky of the gods than in the real world. It was not only a supernatural power to increase speed, but also could control the endless black sky and the ubiquitous complex energy. These energies were like hurricanes, gale winds, burning winds, and storms. They were everywhere, and they could not even be digested and absorbed, because they were too messy and contained countless energies of evil gods. I am afraid that even the 9 righteous gods could not purify the evil will contained in them. Feng Chi could not absorb these energies, but he could use these energies to soar leisurely under the endless black sky. Charlotte could even use the ubiquitous complex wind to feel the energy fluctuations of this world and avoid a certain energy that suddenly became strong in advance, thus avoiding the ubiquitous dangers. He controlled the wind and the energy, and he didn't know how long he had been flying, and finally saw a mountain of flesh and blood. This mountain of flesh and blood was extremely huge. There were countless little people on it, carrying baskets and holding sharp blades, constantly cutting flesh and blood and putting them into the baskets. Whenever someone's basket was filled with flesh and blood, the little person carrying it would scream and disappear on this mountain of flesh and blood. But whenever a little person disappeared, a little person with an empty basket would appear, making this mountain of flesh and blood always work hard and cut flesh without sleep. Charlotte didn't know where these little people came from, but she had a clear understanding that this was Mount Hoddingleen. Karnstein's body was deep in this Mount Hoddingleen. Charlotte took off the golden ring on her hand without any hesitation, threw the entire Holy Light Kingdom down, and then no longer cared about this legendary battleship composed of 5 divine creatures, flew over this mountain of flesh and blood, and flew into the depths of the mountain. Soon Charlotte saw a giant sealed in the mountain. He was entangled by countless blood ropes made of flesh and blood. He closed his eyes and did not move. But just by looking at the giant's chest rising and falling, the flesh squirming, and the blood ropes that were occasionally counterattacked by a certain force and turned into withered ones, you can know that he has been resisting the Hoddingleen mountain that suppressed him. Charlotte took out a blood rose with her backhand, and stabbed the giant's forehead fiercely with her body. The blood rose is just an ordinary extraordinary weapon. As Charlotte's strength increases, it has rarely been taken out and used. But this time, the blood rose bloomed with the most bizarre light. Under Charlotte's full strength stab, it deeply pierced into the giant's forehead. Countless surging blood energy, like crazy, poured into Charlotte Mecklenburg's body. The grade that he was about to break through rushed to the 22nd grade in an instant. Karnstein's voice boomed, "My descendants. My bloodline inheritor. You came to Mount Huotengling to save me. I will grant you immortal life and immortal power. Please accept my gifts, turn them into strength, and use them to defeat my enemies." Charlotte remained silent. The power in her body became more and more surging, and the diary suddenly jumped out. The days of Karnstein's arrival soared all the way, and finally with a slight crisp sound, the side of the vampire scroll was completely shattered. Although Charlotte believed a long time ago that he would be able to get rid of Karnstein sooner or later, just like he killed Agneris, so that the threat of the evil god would no longer be a threat, but he did not expect that this day would come so soon. The moment the vampire scroll was broken, a mysterious power combined with the blood rose, causing the blood-sucking thorn sword to continue to soar in level, and even soon broke through the high-level extraordinary artifact and became a holy-level extraordinary artifact. The giant trapped by the mountain of flesh and blood didn't know how much blood in essence he had lost. He was thinner. He was still muttering to himself, "My bloodline inheritors, my descendants, are there so many of them? I knew you wouldn't let me down." Charlotte's omniscience suddenly sounded a warning. He pulled out the blood spirit and floated into the sky, away from the giant trapped by the mountain of flesh and blood. At the same time, he continued to invest the energy gained from the promotion to the 22nd level into the light agility technique. When the light agility technique was promoted to X18 again, the 18 light agility runes turned into the second bloody rune, Thunder Blow. Charlotte cut off the input to the light agility technique and switched to blood flame gas. Soon, the blood flame gas runes condensed into 18, and condensed into half a rune. Charlotte had never encountered such a thing before, but he was not panicked at all. He invested the remaining energy into the blood flame transformation technique. When the energy for the promotion to the 22nd level was exhausted, the runes of the blood flame transformation spell also condensed into 18 runes. These 18 runes merged with a half rune condensed by the blood flame gas and turned into a brand new blood rune, Transformation. It also has a prefix, Ultimate Transformation Spell. Charlotte didn't know why 2 blood runes would condense into such a rune that seemed to have nothing to do with the blood clan. The giant below suddenly spurted out countless black blood. This black blood should have flown into Charlotte's body along the channel where Charlotte drew power, but now this black blood could only spray into the sky. When they fell, they corroded the mountain of flesh and blood, and even destroyed a small part of the blood rope that trapped the giant. But the mountain of flesh and blood was so huge that it easily eliminated the loss of black blood, flew out more blood ropes, and continued to lock the giant. The giant suddenly fell silent. Although he was trapped here and all his senses were sealed, he still had a vague feeling that the blood and energy he had paid for was indeed absorbed by others, but the vicious means he had set up did not work at all. He could not understand why his descendants of flesh and blood could escape his calculations. Obviously, he could completely suppress these descendants with his blood, and his means were obviously the power of the evil god, which was absolutely not something that mortals could resist. But it seemed that something was wrong. The giant was puzzled. Charlotte's omniscience suddenly jumped a few times. He did not hesitate to activate the ultimate transfiguration, which turned into blood rope and was carried on the giant's body. Even the mountain of flesh and blood did not react to him. Obviously, the ultimate transfiguration had infinite mysteries, and even Charlotte had not yet understood everything about it. A middle-aged traveler carrying a suitcase and covered in dust walked up the mountain of flesh and blood step by step. When he saw the trapped giant, he showed a gentle smile. Chapter 617. He is definitely no longer the blood ancestor. Charlotte, who turned into blood rope, felt like he was falling into an ice cave, because he could see the brilliance of a god on this middle-aged man. Charlotte already knew many secrets of this world, especially after he gained omniscience and promoted omniscience to the level of X4, and obtained all the knowledge of the Emerald Book, received Juno's teachings, obtained the notes of Don Quixote Cervantes, discussed the path to godhood with several of the top saints in the old world, and even learned some of Zimmerman's secrets. So he quickly came to the conclusion, and was very sure that there was nothing wrong with his view. The middle-aged traveler carrying a suitcase was Karnstein. A thought quickly popped up in his mind. He is Karnstein. What is he? Charlotte looked at the trapped giant, and before he could figure out the key, he saw Karnstein stretched out his hand and gently grabbed it. The giant trapped by the blood rope suddenly exploded into blood-colored mist. This mist was like a giant whale sucking water, and was swallowed up by Karnstein. After devouring the original body, Karnstein, even though he was as strong as a true god, could not control himself. A trace of blood mist spread out, but he was extremely angry and screamed, "Who is it? Who stole the blood source of my original body? Is it Sister Amabella? Is it the thief Juno? Or... No, Wood Brandon can't do it, he's far from it, it can't be Zimmerman, he's not a vampire." Charlotte lay on the ground motionless, just like the other blood ropes. Even Karnstein didn't see through the mystery of the ultimate transformation. He didn't put so much effort into Adonis' basic spells. Wood Brandon could feel that the superposition of basic spells was his own natural talent, and others didn't have the same feeling. Karnstein looked up at the sky, revealing a hint of fear, and jumped into the endless black sky with all his strength, disappearing without a trace in an instant. After Karnstein left, a blood rope jumped up, wrapped around more than 10 blood ropes, and pulled hard. Just as the mountain of flesh and blood reacted, a magic dagger flew out, cut off all the blood ropes, and wrapped around the blood ropes of the same kind and flew into the sky. Fengji and Li Chu worked together, and the blood rope in the air returned to its original appearance. He put the dozen blood ropes into the mirror world, and soon came to the outside of the mountain and saw the Holy Light God Kingdom trapped by countless blood ropes. Charlotte was slightly surprised and thought to himself, "I have never seen the Holy Light God Kingdom trapped, this blood and flesh demon mountain. I am afraid it is very strange." He did not dare to neglect it, pulled out the blood rose, cut off dozens of blood ropes, and put them into the mirror world one by one. At this time, the Holy Light God Kingdom suddenly shook, and a divine light rose, sweeping away most of the blood ropes. Charlotte reached out and turned it into a golden ring again, and jumped out of this world with all his strength. When Charlotte appeared outside, he saw a towering mountain. He was no longer in Moldova. Charlotte knew that this was also Mount Ottinglein, the Mount Ottinglein of Baron. Mount Ottinglein had a supreme sacred status in Baron, because it was said that many blood ancestors were sleeping here. Because there were too many sleeping blood ancestors. Anyone with flesh and blood dared not stay near Mount Ottinglein, because no matter whether it was a vampire, a human, a creature, or any living thing, it would be affected by the evil power of the blood ancestors and eventually become part of this mountain. As soon as Charlotte appeared, she saw a familiar person, Juno Arthur. His teacher. Juno's face was not looking good, and he didn't even say hello. He said, "Give me all the blood cords you collected." Charlotte took out all the blood cords from the mirror world and asked, "What's going on?" Juno said lightly, "A new will was born in Karnstein. He came back to take his original body." Charlotte was shocked and shouted, "A new will was born in Karnstein." Juno nodded and said, "Although the newly born consciousness has Karnstein's memory, it is still a brand new existence. No one knows what he is thinking or what he thinks of the blood clan and humans, but he is definitely no longer the blood ancestor. I was in there just now, watching you and him appear one after another, but I couldn't do anything to him for the time being, so I could only do nothing. I didn't expect that the combination of blood flame energy and blood flame deformation would be promoted to the ultimate deformation. The blood clan still has many secrets." Charlotte was slightly surprised and asked, "Even you, teacher, can't know all the secrets of the blood clan?" Juno said calmly, "Only the 3 emperors can know all the secrets of the blood clan. Your teacher is only a saint and has not yet entered the god level. How can he know those ancient secrets?" Charlotte asked again, "What is the use of those blood ropes?" Juno replied, "That mountain is the body of Timothy, the ancestor god of the Aberlahan clan. Those blood ropes can help cultivate the flesh and blood furnace of the Aberlahan clan." Charlotte lost interest when he heard that it would help cultivate the flesh and blood furnace. He was not proficient in the secrets of the Aberlahan clan. Juno said with a complicated face, "You can leave now. It's best not to leave Mount Yangdis recently. The Serpent of Destiny will protect you. I want to unite as many forces as possible. No one knows how far this war of gods will go." Charlotte nodded and left. Although it was his first time to come to the depths of Baron, he did not have any nostalgia. After Charlotte left, a figure flew out from Mount Ottinglein. Juno threw him a blood rope and said, "This is Timothy's flesh and blood. If you refine it, the flesh and blood furnace will be able to advance to a whole new level." Zeus looked at the direction where Charlotte disappeared, and whispered, "Teacher, why didn't you tell him that these blood ropes were asked for me?" Juno replied, "No need, Because he knows, he is much smarter than you. Even Zimmerman back then was not as good as him in many ways. Charlotte is a child. Sometimes she is innocent, but sometimes even I can't see through her. What he did recently was so surprising and unbelievable. Who would have thought that he could tamper with a calendar and let the righteous gods regain the upper hand? The serpent of destiny really controls destiny. Charlotte was indeed as Juno said. When the teacher mentioned that the blood ropes could be used to practice the flesh and blood furnace, he knew that Zeus must be trained under Juno. This teacher is very keen on educating talented people. Charlotte used to think that Juno had a habit of being a teacher. Now he knows that Juno must have seen this battle between gods and accumulated strength for the vampires and humans. However, Juno did not expect that the source of this war would be Zimmerman. Chapter 618 Lantern Temple. Charlotte suddenly stood up. He looked forward, and the omniscient superpower was frantically warning. Charlotte didn't know what was ahead, but he wisely planned to go around and change direction. This time, he flew hundreds of kilometers, and the full-time superpower was frantically warning again. Charlotte changed direction 6 or 7 times in a row, and he found that he was getting more and more deviated and returned to Moldova. Charlotte did not hesitate. He knew that he was afraid he had no choice. According to the omniscient warning, he kept changing directions, and soon he saw a big tomb. The cemetery in the old world is different from the cemeteries in the east and the west on earth. Even the royal family and nobles often choose to be buried in a temple, and there is no custom of burial on earth. Therefore, the cemetery in the old world must be a temple. But it was the first time that Charlotte saw that the entire temple was densely packed with cemeteries without any other buildings. He could barely make out that this temple should be the temple of the old man with the lantern. This god was the most mysterious. Even when he was in charge of the era, he hardly showed any miracles. His temples were also extremely rare, and even the priests were hard to find. Only the lighthouses stood everywhere in the old continent, but the lighthouses were almost unmanned and open to anyone to visit. Charlotte took a deep breath. Since it was the temple of the righteous God, even if there were dangers, they would not be too many. He did not believe that any evil god could invade the temple of the righteous God, especially this temple, which was very large and obviously at the level of the main temple. I am afraid that the old man with the lantern would be as strong as the temple of Mount Agnes or the great temple of Mecklenburg. He flew to the outskirts of the temple and landed. After all, flying around over the temple of the righteous God was very disrespectful. Charlotte walked into the temple and immediately saw the densely packed cemetery. It seemed that something was about to come alive, and countless things were shaking underground. Charlotte hesitated for a moment, but continued to move forward. The things under the cemetery became more and more active, but nothing broke out of the ground. When he walked to the center of the temple, he saw a huge lighthouse. At the top of the lighthouse, a sheepskin roll was enshrined. Charlotte was shocked and could not believe his eyes. He quickly walked to the top of the lighthouse, saw the sheepskin roll, and reached out to grab it. As soon as he got this thing, Charlotte knew that it must be the Dead Sea Parchment Roll, which is as famous as the Jade Book of the Serpent of Destiny and the Golden Book of the Son of the Lord of Light. The Jade Book collected by Charlotte resonated at the first time. Although these 3 books are praised as the source of human civilization, Charlotte did not believe it before. After getting the Jade Book, she knew that it was not the case. There should be many heroic spirits living in the Jade Book, and there are many traces of heroic spirits in the Jade Book. The Serpent of Destiny should have collected many souls of the most outstanding people in history. However, when he gave the Jade Book, he took away those heroes and left only an empty shell. The knowledge, civilization, art, and secrets of God recorded in the Jade Book are all in the memories of those heroes, so it is called the source of human civilization. But inside the Dead Sea Parchment, there is a surge of evil, and countless tyrannical and evil thoughts seem to break through the artifact of the old man with the lantern, rush into the world, and wreak havoc on the living beings. Charlotte only held it for a moment, and he was able to sense that there were at least thousands of quasi-evil gods imprisoned in the Dead Sea Parchment. He also understood why the Serpent of Fate took away the heroes in the Jade Book, but the old man with the lantern gave him the complete Dead Sea Parchment. Because he really didn't need these quasi-evil gods, they only had thoughts, memories, and souls left, and all the valuable flesh, strength, and energy were not in it. It can be guessed that the old man with the lantern took those things away, leaving only these useless residues. Well, the quasi-evil gods imprisoned in the Dead Sea Scrolls can also be called evil god remnants. They have been deprived of almost all valuable things, leaving only garbage. Charlotte didn't know and didn't understand why the old man with the lantern gave him the Dead Sea Scrolls. He had no relationship with this righteous God and never believed in him. Although the scrolls only imprisoned the souls of a group of evil gods, they were artifacts after all and their value was inestimable. Before Charlotte could think of a few thoughts, everything in front of him suddenly disappeared. The lantern tower, the huge ancient tomb, and the temple were all gone. Only he was left floating in the air with the Dead Sea Scroll in his hand. Charlotte was stunned for a long time before he put away the Dead Sea Scroll. He thought to himself, the old man with the lantern is trying to pass on the blame. What trap did he set for me? Although the Dead Sea Scroll is a divine weapon, it cannot be used to increase strength, but can only be used to forge weapons. Forge weapons? Charlotte suddenly felt like a door was opened. He thought of countless possibilities. He turned around without hesitation and headed straight for Mecklenburg. He needed to verify one thing. This time, there was no sign of danger in front of Charlotte. He returned to Mecklenburg safely and returned to the great temple of the Serpent of Fate. Charlotte summoned Sean Connor and William Triton, and without even greeting them, asked, if I can provide a very dangerous but nearly inexhaustible energy source, what kind of weapons can you make? Sean Connor had never thought about this question before, and immediately fell into deep thought, but William Triton's eyes lit up and he shouted, I can make 1,000 men, or even 10,000 men, make expensive, even holy level alchemical weapons. Charlotte nodded and said, I want you to lead a project to develop new weapons, and I have found a group of alchemists to help you. Neither of them knew where Charlotte could find a group of alchemists. Alchemy is an extremely expensive profession, and there are not many in the entire continent. Most of the down-and-out alchemists have very poor standards because they have no money to do experiments. Although William Triton has a whimsical design, the actual level is also average. Those with a high enough level generally have opened an alchemy workshop and are very rich, so they can't be recruited at all. Charlotte did not tell them the details, but just gave them a few instructions and asked them to prepare. When only one person was left, Charlotte placed the Jade Book on the roof of the Great Temple of Destiny. This thing was not afraid of being stolen because it was always a divine artifact made by the Serpent of Destiny. When the Jade Book was embedded in the roof of the Great Temple of Destiny, the divine light covering Mecklenburg became at least 5 times stronger. Charlotte prayed silently, all the ancient alchemy gods, please help me design a weapon that is powered by the soul of the evil god and has unparalleled power. Humanity needs this batch of weapons, and the Serpent of Destiny also needs this batch of weapons. Chapter 619, The Evil God Invades Ingrima. Charlotte's prayer was soon answered. He saw the ancient alchemists, led by Mani, descending into the Jade Book one by one. He threw the Dead Sea parchment scroll into the Jade Book, and soon Mani appeared in the great temple of the Serpent of Fate. This group of ancient alchemists had been firmly bound to the Serpent of Fate and became the servant gods of the Serpent of Fate. They were not complete gods and lacked many key steps to become gods, but with the favor of the Serpent of Fate, the concepts condensed in Charlotte's novel could last forever. Therefore, they were the ones who hoped most that the Serpent of Fate could win this war and that Charlotte's novel would be passed down forever. As long as the Serpent of Fate was there and Charlotte's novel was passed down forever, they could be like real gods. If one link was missing, they would have to return to the Jade Secret Scroll, or even worse, because the one who was in charge of the Jade Secret Scroll was the Serpent of Fate. Mani said to Charlotte, I have guided Sean Connor and William Triton in my dream. Although William Triton's idea is rough, it is very wonderful and can be used as the foundation for making weapons, but his alchemy foundation is too poor, so all the designs must be remade. We need a large amount of materials. Please send them all to the Great Temple. Charlotte agreed immediately. At this time, there was no need to worry about the investment. Even the old man with the lantern sent the Dead Sea parchment scroll, which showed that the war between the gods was not easy. Charlotte did not greet Master Mani much, but went directly back to the city lord's mansion and ordered all his men to fully support Sean Connor and William Triton, and to build new weapons at all costs. Charlotte had been in Mecklenburg for only a few days when a message came out that 8 evil gods appeared in the Sea of Giant Whales and attacked Ojibwe, the largest of the 3 islands of Inglima. Now Britannia has fallen into panic, and the Red Dragon Emperor Alfred Guillaume has launched a request for assistance from the countries of the Old World. Among the 3 islands of Inglima, Britannia is the smallest, but it is the essence of Inglima and the place where most of the population is located. Galling Island ranks second, but there are too many mountains. The Inglima royal family only included it in the rule and did not invest much energy in development. Charlotte used the Cappadocia city as a base, and the population transported back and forth was almost 5 times that of the natives of Galling Island. Like Ojibwe and Galling Island, the natives have always tried to resist the rule of Inglima. The 3 islands of Inglima and thousands of large and small islands have been conquered 7 times and unified 3 times. People who crossed the sea from various countries in the Old World have established more than 20 kingdoms. Duke Guillaume, one of the founding dukes of Fars, led a large army across the sea and nominally unified the 3 islands of Inglima and established a Red Dragon dynasty, but he has not been able to suppress the resistance of the islands. There are even rebels in Britannia. Although the invasion of the evil gods would most likely exterminate all the residents of Ojibwe Island, the Inglima Empire would never want to achieve unification in this way. Moreover, once the 8 evil gods crossed the sea and invaded Britannia, the Inglima Empire might perish at any time. They had to rescue Ojibwe and make sure that the battlefield would stay on this island and that the evil gods would not invade Britannia. As a guest of the Red Dragon Emperor, Charlotte was also sent a formal request for assistance. Emperor Alfred Guillaume even generously promised that he was willing to grant him the entire Galling Island and also promised him the extraordinary status of a duke. If Charlotte could really repel the 8 evil gods and get the reward from Emperor Alfred Guillaume, he would not only be the Duke of Mechlin of Fars, but also the Duke of Mechlin of Inglima. His territory would be an aristocratic territory spanning the 2 empires, a wealthy and powerful family that had never existed in the history of the old continent. If Anne's 2 territories are added, it can be said that in the Old World, apart from the royal families of the 4 great empires, there are no nobles comparable to them, not even the kings of the small countries. Charlotte immediately responded, agreed to the request for help from the current Red Dragon Emperor, and promised to personally lead all the fleets and dozens of saints to Ojibwe. Charlotte was not worried about her old nest. The Duchy of Mechlin was full of temples of the Serpent of Fate. Originally, the Serpent of Fate had no time to care about the human world, but since he obtained a large number of servant gods, the entire snake has become active, repeatedly showing miracles and spreading divine glory everywhere. Moreover, ancient alchemists can appear in any temple of the Serpent of Fate, and some can even appear in various entertainment venues. Even if Charlotte Mechlin mobilized all her subordinates, the Duchy of Mechlin would still be as stable as a mountain. Not to mention the direction of Moldova. After the completion of the temple in Mount Angus, it is equivalent to establishing a solid line of defense. Only 1 or 2 saints are needed to garrison there. Unless Zimmerman attacks, nothing will happen. Emperor Alfred Guillaume sat silently in his Red Dragon Palace. After a while, several officials came in a hurry. Every time they reported a piece of news, the atmosphere in the Red Dragon Palace became more depressing, because almost all the requests for help from the Inglima Empire were rejected. Although the Inglima Empire knew that the coalition forces of various countries were resisting the New World Coalition led by Zimmerman and Baron, and it was difficult to transfer manpower, this news was still frustrating. Count Sumer-E suddenly came hurriedly and said with a look of surprise, "Your Majesty." Duke Mechlin has a reply. Emperor Alfred Guillaume raised his head slightly and said, "Did Lord Mechlin reject me too?" Count Sumer-E said, "Duke Mechlin is personally leading his fleet and all the saints and is rushing to Ojibwe." It was thought that the empire would fight to the death. Of course, Count Sumer-E's rhetoric was a little exaggerated, but the troops dispatched by Charlotte were almost as strong as all their strength, so his words were not too exaggerated. Emperor Alfred Guillaume was slightly inspired and said, "Did Lord Mechlin really agree to help?" Count Sumer whispered, "Duke Mechlin sent 3 letters in a row. The place where each letter was sent was 50 kilometers closer to Ingrima. His fleet has indeed set off and is sailing at full speed to Ingrima." The young Red Dragon Emperor smiled slightly and said, "Lord Mechlin. He is really an important minister of Ingrima. In my name, issue an edict to confer Charlotte Mechlin as the Duke of Ingrima, and the territory as Galling Island. If it were any other time, this document from the royal family would inevitably be opposed by Ingrima. How could a Fars man be allowed to become the Duke of Ingrima? And the entire Galling Island was conferred as a territory? But at this time, after this document was issued, the nobles of Ingrima all accepted it silently. Chapter 620 Battle of Ojibwe Island. Charlotte received the magic alchemy communication on the Holy Light God. He did not expect that Emperor Alfred Guillaume would keep his promise so well. He had not even fought for Ingrima before he officially issued the title of Duke. Charlotte became the dual duke of the two empires. This matter was not very important to him, but it greatly boosted morale and made the entire Knights of Favonius excited. The cohesion of the Knights of Favonius was originally strong. After being canonized by the Red Dragon Emperor of Ingrima, the cohesion was once again raised to a higher level. Especially the old members, they all knew that part of the strength of their lords was in Cappadocia city. Cappadocia was even a lifeline for the Knights of Favonius. All discordant voices would be sent to Cappadocia, and all kinds of materials would be transported through Cappadocia. This small city was the trade hub of the old continent, the three islands of Ingrima, and overseas. But Galling Island is the territory of Ingrima, and Charlotte's rule in Cappadocia is not solid. But now it is different. His Majesty Alfred Guillaume has conferred Galling Island to Charlotte Mechlin. From now on, this will be the stable base of Duke Mechlin. The area of Galling Island is even slightly larger than the Duchy of Mechlin in Fars. Although they are all mountainous, for those who have been under Charlotte for a long time, they all think that the terrain is not an obstacle to economic development. Charlotte has also developed Moldova very well. In addition to cheering, Andreas proposed to celebrate. Charlotte did not spoil everyone's fun. Soon, the generals of the Knights of Favonius gathered on the Holy Light Kingdom, and brought the entertainment attributes of this legendary warship to the extreme, and soon held a grand celebration. Still fighting, but only the Knights of Favonius can hold a celebration. Charlotte brought his own fleet and arrived in Cappadocia a few days later. He only met with senior sister Menelman briefly, and then took his men, bypassed Galling Island, and headed straight for Ojibwe Island. Almost all of Ingrima's fleets gathered on Ojibwe Island. When Charlotte's Favonius fleet arrived on Ojibwe Island, it received a grand welcome. Ingrima's Royal Navy originally thought that there would be no reinforcements, but Charlotte's appearance made them very excited, because Charlotte's men had 3 legendary warships, 7 magic alchemy warships, 11 ancient magic ghost warships, dozens of saints, and more than 20 undead saints. This strength is even enough to rival any of the 4 empires. Even if the 4 empires fully support, they may not be stronger than the Favonius at this moment. As the Duke of the Fiefdom of the 2 empires, Charlotte soon became the leader of the fleet coalition of Ingrima and Duke Mechlin. In particular, 7 or 8 days later, the fleets of Menelman and Sophia Gallinold also arrived at the battlefield one after another, which made the morale of the Royal Navy of Ingrima even more excited. However, no matter how high the morale was, facing the 8 evil gods, Charlotte still did not dare to be negligent. He sent several saints with fast enough flying speed to scout Ojibwe Island, and soon found a gratifying intelligence. The 8 evil gods each occupied a piece of territory and were working hard to develop. There was no sign of joining forces or leaving the occupied territory to raid Britannia. Although Charlotte had conquered the evil gods and won the battle, seizing part of the power of Ishmarin and Agmiris, the power of these 2 evil gods was incomplete. Ishmarin had even fallen long ago, and Agmiris was also besieged by the 3 evil gods. Without his body, Charlotte was only facing the body of this evil god, so he still put all his energy into this battle. Charlotte first used thousands of mirrors transported from Mecklenburg to deploy the Infinite Mirror Realm on Ojibwe Island. He needed to cover the island with the Infinite Mirror Realm first, and then try to maze some of the land that has not been occupied by the evil gods, so as to gain the greatest home advantage before fighting against the evil gods. This time, Charlotte not only had himself, but also the Ingrima Royal Navy, his own Mecklenburg fleet, and Menelman's Imperial Rose fleet and Sophia Giranid's East Wind fleet to help. Such a huge strength was enough to support him to do many things. With Charlotte's efforts, the entire Ojibwe Island was soon covered by the Infinite Mirror Realm. Charlotte could even sense 8 huge evil auras within dozens of kilometers near the waters of Ojibwe Island, which were constantly rolling and eroding the land on the island. Once these lands were included in the evil power range of the evil gods, they would have various characteristics, making it very convenient for them to exert their evil power. At that point, it would be almost impossible to expel these evil gods. After Charlotte expanded the Infinite Mirror Realm, he began to try to maze the land on Ojibwe Island that had not yet been controlled by the 8-headed evil god. This time it was quite unsuccessful. Charlotte was only a saint after all. Although he was already at the 22nd level and had the authority of the Labyrinth evil god, he still had no way to compete with any evil god. The maze he laid was often eroded by the nearby evil gods. Although the evil gods who destroyed the maze did not have enough power to directly erode this land, They often retreated after the destruction and quietly cultivated their own strength range, which still caused Charlotte a lot of confusion. Charlotte quickly took out her trump card and began to try to build temples of the Serpent of Destiny in various places on Ojibwe Island. When the first temple of the Serpent of Destiny on Ojibwe Island was built from scratch, no matter Charlotte or even ordinary saints could sense the favor from the Serpent of Destiny. Even ordinary warriors could feel more courage and even their strength was slightly improved. After Charlotte participated in the foundation of the first temple of the Serpent of Fate, she continued to transport the Great Lingmo from the Holy Light Kingdom to the temple on Ojibwe Island, and soon established the first entertainment venue on Ojibwe Island. It was not that Charlotte did not distinguish between the important and the unimportant, but the establishment of the Temple of the Serpent of Fate made the Serpent of Fate more closely connected with the world, and the ancient alchemists belonging to the Serpent of Fate could also come down and fight side by side with the believers. Charlotte's actions finally angered an evil god. This evil god was surrounded by several maze cities, and at first he continued to break through these mazes, but when the Temple of the Serpent of Fate was established, he finally left his territory in anger and went straight to the city where the Temple of the Serpent of Fate was built. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 621, The Weakness of the Evil God. Countless sand, mud, and dirt rolled up the dust and mud rain, rolling like a mountain, rushing towards Charlotte's largest stronghold on Ojibwe Island. Even the members of the Knights of Favonius, who had experienced fighting with the Allied war, could not help but change their faces. Ordinary soldiers and the Royal Navy of Ingrima could not bear this power at all. Many people even had the idea of escaping. Even Charlotte couldn't help but roar, "Push the Emilia out, the Holy Light Kingdom can be transformed into golden ring, which is very convenient to carry, but the Emilia does not have this convenience." Charlotte knows that she needs this little daughter very much in the next war, so she begs the ancient alchemists to make dozens of transport vehicles that can be towed by animal power to drag the Emilia onto land. There is no good way to transport super large and super heavy objects, even on Earth. The solutions of the ancient alchemists also have many limitations. Many places cannot be transported at all, but it can finally solve some problems. It's better to have something than nothing. Charlotte herself rose into the air and rushed to the front line. She threw the Holy Light God's kingdom down into the muddy storm-like force field of the evil god. The Holy Light God's kingdom turned into a legendary battleship and landed on the ground with a loud rumble. The impact of the evil god was immediately stopped. As the Emilia was pushed out of the city and into the battlefield by more than a dozen saints, the situation suddenly improved a lot. Dozens of saints boarded the Holy Light God's kingdom. Like Charlotte, they entered another world in an instant. With the blessing of the 5 divine creatures, they fought with the mud monsters that fell from the sky. Charlotte also stepped onto the Holy Light God's kingdom and activated the blood spirit, borrowing the power of Amen. He was also very surprised when he saw the mud monsters all over the sky. He had never seen this form of evil god before. This evil god seemed to have no body, or rather, his body was endless mud, dirt, dust, and mud monsters. When they were killed, they would turn into spots of mud, real mud, which made the Holy Light God's kingdom look dirty and ugly. Even Dapo Kiloato shouted loudly, "These damn monsters are simply inedible." Faced with this situation, Charlotte plunged into the mud. With the help of Omniscience X4, he could vaguely sense that there would be a control center in the mud. As long as this center could be broken, the evil god could be killed or at least repelled. If this center could not be broken, they would have to roll in the mud all the time, and the battle would continue and could never stop. Faced with endless mud monsters, Charlotte did not fight with them at all, but just bravely rushed into the depths of the mud. Charlotte didn't know how long he had been flying. He even felt that he could no longer fly. His whole body was covered with mud. He couldn't even shake it off because no matter how much he shook off, there would always be more mud stuck on him. He was originally trekking in the mud. If it weren't for Amen's power and Omniscience X4, Charlotte would have lost his way long ago and been swallowed by the endless mud like a mountain and a sea. Charlotte used Bloody Glory to break the thick mud on his body. Although there would be more mud stuck on him later, he felt a little relieved for the time being. He was about to find the direction, and the whisper of destiny, which had been silent for a long time, suddenly made a soft sound and guided him in the direction. At the beginning, he got 3 golden rings. One was given to Princess May, which was the key to controlling the queen bee. Another one was transformed into Whisper of Destiny after swallowing the body of a divine creature. It often guided Charlotte and pointed him in the right direction. But after gaining omniscience, Charlotte rarely heard the Whisper of Fate. This time, the reminder of the Whisper of Fate suddenly lifted his spirits. He urged the Bloody Glory to fly wildly for a while. Suddenly, the pressure around him was relieved and there was no more mud. Charlotte saw an extremely clean pure white space. In this space, a feather was sleeping. This feather had no mixed colors and was jade-like, like a work of art that was ingenious. Charlotte activated the transfiguration spell and changed twice in a row to get rid of all the mud on her body, making her whole body clean and refreshed. Then she flew to the side of the feather and reached out to grab it. The feather did not resist at all, but when Charlotte touched it, the feather turned into nothingness. Charlotte immediately felt that a new authority had merged into her soul. This authority had nothing to do with mud, and it had nothing to do with feathers. It was called dirt. It can manipulate all the dirt in time, including tangible dirt, intangible dirt, dirt on will, and even spiritual dirt. It can be dispelled or blessed. The mud all over the sky is just one of its manifestations. The body of this evil god is this endless mud. His soul and consciousness have long collapsed, and only instincts and the messy consciousness formed after he became an evil god are left. Only when the authority is complete, Charlotte got the authority, and saw the Dead Sea parchment scroll unfolding in the void, collecting the collapsed, chaotic, and polluted soul and consciousness of this evil god. This time he went out to fight. He did not bring the Jade Book, but he brought the Dead Sea parchment scroll, the guidance from the Serpent of Destiny and the artifact from the old man with the lantern. Let Charlotte defeat this very weak evil god. It was only after Charlotte seized the authority of dirt that he found that although this evil god was very powerful and difficult to deal with, he was actually weak to the point of being worse than Agmirus. He should have been injured in the chaos of evil gods in the New World not long ago. Generally speaking, after becoming an evil god, even if the original will and soul are broken, a new, evil, powerful, chaotic, but definitely intelligent will be born. However, his consciousness is extremely weak, and he can't even react to Charlotte's invasion. He just hides the most precious authority in the deepest part of his body by instinct. Theoretically, no one can find the feather in the huge mud storm like a mountain or a sea. But Charlotte got the guidance of the Snake of Fate, and found the authority belonging to the evil god by the Whisper of Fate, which means that the balance of victory has tilted more than half. When the Dead Sea parchment appeared, there was only one result left for this battle. Charlotte pointed to the sky. Without the manipulation of the evil god, all the mud began to gather in one place and soon gathered into a mountain. Chapter 622, Great Temple of Ojibwe Island. As the body of an evil god, this mountain is a living thing. Charlotte didn't know how to deal with it. Even the Holy Light God Kingdom and Emilia couldn't devour this evil god. He could only leave it here temporarily. Maybe there would be a way in the future? With the appearance of this mountain, the rolling mud disappeared. The generals and soldiers of the Knights of Favonius looked at the sudden appearance of the mud mountain and the Duke of Mecklenburg floating in the sky, and cheered loudly. Amun looked at Charlotte in the sky and murmured to himself, "Father, you are very close to becoming a god. I hope, after my father becomes a god, he can still remember our family." He disappeared into the void. In this world, no one knew that Amun was becoming more and more humane, and no one knew what would happen to a divine creature after it regained its humanity. Charlotte activated the Dirt Authority, and a faint light rolled over her body. Not only the mud on her body, but also the stains in her clothes, even the surface of her body, and even all kinds of dirt inside her body, all disappeared. Charlotte remembered some fantasy novels on Earth. When a person cultivates to a certain level, he can enter the impurity state, or the leakage-free state. The whole body is like colored glaze, without any impurities, which can increase the strength of the body. There is no such saying in this world. Even if it is a saint, there will be some impurities in the body that cannot be discharged. But after possessing the Dirt Authority, he can do things that no saint can do, and adjust the whole body directly to the most perfect state, removing all the flaws that appear due to aging, the minor scars on the body due to cultivation, and all kinds of pollution that affect the body and mind. Charlotte could even feel that her body had reached a higher level, becoming more manipulable, and the operation of Bloody Glory was smoother. Even the slight effects of facing the evil gods and the righteous gods in the past were eliminated. The spirituality of the whole person had a slight explosion, and this time the spirituality was not only not affected by any negative effects, but even purer. He didn't know what the power of dirt could be used for, but at this moment, he was very happy. In an instant, he thought of 7 or 8 ways to use the power of dirt. Compared with the power of the maze, the power of dirt was not temporary, but was truly obtained by him. Charlotte knew that this was an alternative reward given to him by the Serpent of Fate and the Lantern Old Man. Otherwise, even if an evil god was weak, even if his soul was broken and his will was confused, it would never be so easy for him to rob the power and take away his soul and will. This also means that in the war between gods, the Fate Snake and the Lantern Man have the upper hand, instead of the previous state where they had no time to split themselves, and even the Fate Snake could not respond to prayers without the help of the temple. Charlotte took a deep breath and returned to his own camp. He looked at the muddy ground and pointed without hesitation. All the mud, dirt, and dust separated from the camp of the Knights of Favonius, the generals, and the soldiers, floating up into the sky, turning into a layer of gray mist, lingering towards the mountain, and landing on the mountain, merging into the body of the evil god. Charlotte shouted, "We have killed an evil god. His body is not far away, and has turned into that mountain. We have the protection of the righteous gods, so we can achieve such a glorious victory. I will open the great temple of the Serpent of Fate on Ojibwe Island so that everyone can bathe in the divine light. Our victory this time is also blessed by the old man with the lantern. I will build a lantern tower in every city." Charlotte's announcement once again triggered cheers. Although he is a die-hard believer in the Serpent of Fate, the generals and soldiers of the Knights of Favonius have their own beliefs. Not all of them believe in the Serpent of Fate, but the establishment of each great temple of the Serpent of Fate means an additional extremely prosperous entertainment venue. Although the Holy Light Kingdom is a holy place in the minds of all the soldiers of the Knights of Favonius, this legendary worship is too small. It can only accommodate a few thousand people at most. Many lower-level soldiers can't even get a place. But whether it is Hot Spring Mountain or the Great Temple of Mount Gandhis, they have the ability to receive tens of thousands of people at the same time, which is enough to benefit more people. These two great temples are really too fascinating. The Great Temple of Ojibwe Island has just been built, and many entertainment facilities have not yet been built, but the first batch of migrating demons have begun professional training and rehearsals of songs and dances, and everyone is looking forward to it. Especially the Royal Navy officers from Englima. They have heard that the two major entertainment holy places in the Duchy of Mecklen are simply paradise on earth, with the ultimate enjoyment, but as Englima people, they have no chance to go to Hot Spring Mountain and Mount Gandhis. Now Charlotte has become the Duke of Englima and has also built a great temple on Ojibwe Island, which means that all Englima people can come here to play and have fun. Although these Royal Navy officers knew that the Red Dragon Emperor Alfred Guillaume had a special preference for Charlotte, some of them still expressed dissatisfaction with Charlotte. After all, Charlotte had not done anything and had no merit, but she was rewarded as the Duke of the Empire and became the commander of the coalition forces. But when Charlotte defeated an evil god and allowed the opening of the Great Temple of Ojibwe Island, these Englima Royal Navy officers secretly felt that Emperor Alfred Guillaume was wise and powerful. After Charlotte defeated an evil god, the situation on Ojibwe Island was slightly better. He quickly occupied the original territory of the evil god who held the power of filth. However, the other 7 evil gods seemed to have a tacit understanding and would never leave their territory again. Charlotte could only advance silently and then endure the counterattack of the evil gods. If these evil gods did not leave their territory, they would have a great advantage. Even if the two righteous gods were biased, he could not break through the territory of any evil god. However, there was good news. At least he had stabilized Ojibwe Island and resolved the crisis in Britannia. The evil gods showed no signs of attacking Britannia, the root of Engrima. The news that Charlotte had killed an evil god and resisted the other 7 evil gods was passed back to Britain. The nobles, who had only acquiesced to his becoming the Duke of Engrima, began to sing praises to His Majesty Alfred Guillaume and asked His Majesty the Emperor to allow some of the nobles to migrate to Ojibwe Island. The fertile land in Britannia had long been divided up, and many nobles had no fiefdoms. Now that Charlotte had begun to develop Ojibwe Island, almost all the nobles in the old world knew that the Duke of Mecklen was good at revitalizing the economy, and they all wanted to come to this island to share a piece of the pie. Chapter 623, Attacking the Second Evil God. Of course, these nobles would not move their families to Ojibwe Island at this time. Even after the war, They would most likely not move to Ojibwe Island, but would still live in the prosperous Breton, but would collect a large amount of taxes from their fiefdoms every year for their extravagant life. These nobles of Inglima were not worried that Charlotte would not agree. After all, the Duke of Mecklen's territory was Galling Island, not Ojibwe Island. Although Charlotte acted like a master on Ojibwe Island and built the great temple of the Serpent of Destiny, any noble needed subordinate nobles. No noble could manage such a large piece of land. The nobles needed subordinate nobles to take care of part of the land for them, and these subordinate nobles also had to pay taxes to the nobles. After all, taking care of the land was much harder than collecting taxes. This is not the tradition of Ingrima. It is the same in the whole old world. In every duke and earl's territory, there are a bunch of small nobles. They squeeze the residents in the territory and provide various services from taxes to wars, and even provide families. For example, many female officials around the wives of great nobles are noble ladies from small noble families. The daughters of ordinary people cannot get such a generous position. Emperor Alfred Guillaume did not refuse, but transferred all the requests to Charlotte and let him handle it himself. Charlotte was also very straightforward. He made a request to all the nobles who proposed to obtain the fiefdom of Ojibwe Island. They must send people to help in the war and divide the land according to the number of people sent. He even explained considerately that it does not have to be soldiers, any population can be. When the news reached Breton, the Duke of Mecklen's reputation immediately rose to a higher level, and there were voices praising his merits everywhere. Then, the prisons in Breton were emptied by these nobles, and a prisoner could even be sold for 1.5 shillings. Then, the homeless people wandering around Breton were put in sacks while they were sunbathing. Even the thieves and gang members who were everywhere in Breton were pricey in Breton. They were caught from their hiding places and sent to Ojibwe Island. As a result, the public security in Breton, which was not very good to begin with, suddenly became better. This movement soon affected the children and even adults of poor families. These ordinary people were escorted onto ships by these nobles through various illegal and even lawless means, and were also sent to Ojibwe Island. Charlotte didn't care about anything and accepted all these people. She arranged for them to take a bath, check their bodies, change clothes, and then sent them to reclaim the island of Galling. After all, Galling was the dukedom of Mecklen, and Galling was short of people. The system of the territory ruled by Charlotte was several generations ahead of the old continent, which led to lack of labor force, especially land reclamation work, which was simply a bottomless pit that swallowed up the population. Charlotte did not break his promise. He did arrange territories for these nobles in the interior of Ojibwe Island, according to the population sent by the nobles of Ingrima. Of course, most of the territories arranged by Charlotte are still in the domain of the evil god. However, these nobles of Ingrima would not come to Ojibwe Island. And they did not know where their territories were. Moreover, it was a war period, and they did not dare to come to inspect their territories. They could only enjoy what crops their land could produce according to the super fertile, first level fertile, second level fertile, these damn standards divided by Charlotte. Well, these nobles still treat the management of land as farms, and have no other means of management. Cruz is now very busy. He was originally just the manager of Cappadocia, but as Charlotte became the Duke of Galling Island, he was promoted to the manager of the entire Galling Island. Charlotte has not yet issued him a new position, but his authority has expanded countless times. Because Charlotte has always been committed to combating human trafficking and never discriminates against local people, especially Cappadocia, which has benefited countless people, so his prestige among the natives of Galling Island is quite high. After becoming the Lord of Galling Island was full of joy and encouragement, and there was no opposition at all. Well, there should have been some opposition, but they all went to the Argyll Sea Islands. Charlotte's continuous import of a large number of people has also brought about earth-shaking changes in the population structure of Galling Island. No one cares about where they come from anymore, but instead cares more about the industry they are in. After all, the industry they are in is closely related to everyone. With another wave of population inflow from Ingrima, Galling Island also entered a period of rapid development. After a busy day of government affairs, Cruz drank tea on the balcony and took a short rest. A big demon came over gently and gave him a simple shoulder massage, which made Cruz feel so comfortable that he wanted to enjoy the moment forever. Charlotte was never stingy with his subordinates. Cruz and Zeman had no chance to board the Holy Light Kingdom on Galling Island, nor could they enjoy the Hot Spring Mountain and Ganges Mountain, So he sent a group of big demons, nominally female service officers, to provide formal services to officials at all levels of Galling Island. Cruz only picked a big demon, and now he can't leave it alone. The daily clothes of this big demon. Almost all the big demons, under Charlotte's intentional or unintentional selection, are proficient in various skills, such as massage, cooking, pastries, translation, playing cards, super high memory, daily sundries handling, and even bodyguards, with a main function of providing emotional value. Just as Cruz was enjoying the rare quietness of the day, Zeman broke into his mansion and shouted, "Cruz, have you heard? The Duke is going to attack the second evil god again. We must do a good job in logistics. How is the collection of food, vegetables and fruits that you are responsible for going? Ojibwe Island is very desolate and has hardly been developed. It cannot provide a large army for a war. Everything needed must be mobilized from Galling Island. Galling Island itself cannot provide so many supplies, so it has to be purchased from various places. Fortunately, the development of the Argyle Islands has achieved initial success. Many resources are continuously transported from the Argyle Sea, alleviating a considerable crisis." Cress smiled and said, "I have already arranged it. A new batch of supplies will be shipped to Ojibwe Island soon." At this moment, Charlotte was indeed preparing to force the second evil god out of the territory. In the territory, the power of the evil gods was almost unlimited, and they had to be lured out before they had a chance to kill them. However, the evil god he chose was quite cunning. Charlotte tried several times, but he remained unmoved. He even preferred to endure the crisis of the territory being compressed, and was unwilling to attack. Chapter 624 New Weapons, New War. Charlotte learned the origin of this evil god from the leopard man emission. It was the evil god Gompers. A monster that looked like a meatball but had countless tentacles and was dozens of kilometers long. Most importantly, this monster could fly and was very difficult to deal with. Charlotte wanted to lure the other party out. As long as he left the territory, it would be easy to deal with, but this evil god seemed to be rooted in the field and did not move. Charlotte tried several times and had to give up and switch to another evil god. This time, before the war started, new weapons were sent from Mecklenburg. With the Dead Sea parchment scrolls given by the old man with the lantern, the protection of the Serpent of Fate, the wisdom of the ancient alchemist with the whole Emerald Book, and Charlotte's full support, the newly created weapons can be called a miracle born from the power of the two righteous gods. It is somewhat similar to the Centurion, except that the lower body is not an alchemical mechanical horse, but an alchemical spider. The upper body is still a shield in front, and there is a cabin in the back. Because it is an alchemical spider, the body is much wider and has a certain carrying capacity, and more weapons can be installed. There is a faint glow on this weapon. It is not a magic circle. At present, the alchemical technology of the old world cannot make the magic circle so small, and it is impossible for one person below the saint level to launch it. It is a force field emitted by the fragments of the evil god's soul. Although the essence is different, the function is the same, that is, it plays the role of defending the magic circle. Due to technical problems, the soul fragments of the evil god cannot be implanted too much. Compared with land battleships, its protection is slightly weaker, otherwise it will pollute the operator, but it does not need the support of fighting spirit and magic power provided by the driver, and its endurance combat capability is not bad. Simply put, this new weapon is a super centurion with the protection ability of a land battleship. Of course, it is named the 1,000 Centurions. It can indeed fight 1 against 1,000. Below the saint level, it has almost no rivals. Above the saint level, it can also resist for 1 or 2 hours. Although it cannot hurt the flying saint level, the saint level cannot do anything to the evil god force field on it for a while. Most importantly, the Centurion is not a custom-made product, but a mass-produced product. This time, 20 pieces were transported from Mecklenburg, but even if it is a mass-produced product, its driver requirements have been raised. At least a mid-level extraordinary person can drive it. Although the Centurion has been equipped with a William Tridon magic circle, which was invented by a certain Professor Ingrima, it can gather the power of ordinary soldiers into one person and resist the magic circle of low-level extraordinary people, but it can only gather the power of dozens of ordinary soldiers at most. When fighting with land warships, dozens of operators in the land warships can provide what the Centurion driver needs. The William Tridon type magic circle installed on the Centurion is enough to gather the power of hundreds of people, which requires a proper army. In addition, The centurion can be equipped with more weapons and equipment, which also requires a logistics force for support. In short, when the centurion appeared, Charlotte knew that her Knights of Favonius would embark on the road of futuristic and alchemical army, and would become something completely different from the old-fashioned army of the old world. William Triton's original design, limited by his vision, did not actually have any requirements for operators and drivers, but when the actual product was designed, whether it was a land battleship, a centurion, or a centurion, it required low-level or even mid-level extraordinary people to operate and control it. Fortunately, thanks to Charlotte's inclusiveness, he annexed a large number of orcs and immigrants from the New World, and he had no shortage of mid-level extraordinary people. Charlotte selected a group of mid-level extraordinary people and trained them for more than 10 days. This group of centurions and their drivers were ready to fight. Charlotte delayed the war a little because of the arrival of the centurion, but as soon as the selection and training of the centurion's drivers were completed, the war against the evil god Lord of Decay was put on the agenda again. The Lord of Decay is the notorious evil god on the New World. Well, notorious in the literal sense. His body is countless humans, beasts, birds, poultry and livestock gathered together, constantly rotting, forming a ball of extremely foul smell, bones, mud and flesh, rotten and decayed, indescribable things. Because it crossed a vast ocean from the New World to the Old World, this evil god also devoured countless marine creatures, various fish, shrimps, seaweed, and sea beasts, mixed together, and it can make people sick even if they are 100 kilometers away. If Charlotte had a choice, he would definitely not want to fight this evil god, but he had no choice for the time being. The only consolation was that the first evil god he killed gave him the authority of dirt, allowing Charlotte to give his soldiers a layer of protection. It could not resist physical attacks, but it could resist all kinds of foul smells and toxins floating in the air, allowing them to move freely on the battlefield and exert normal combat effectiveness. This is too important. Andreas had gone to scout this evil god, and after returning, he took 18 baths, ran to the beach, and took deep breaths for 2 hours before he could speak normally. The saints under Charlotte were more terrified when they heard the name of the Lord of Decay than when they were targeted by any other evil god. At Charlotte's urging, the Knights of Favonius quickly invaded the domain of the Lord of Decay, where there was a stench everywhere, decaying things everywhere, and there were countless monsters wandering in the domain, made up of countless decaying things. Charlotte chose the Lord of Decay because the body of this evil god would continue to split and produce all kinds of pollutants, and cleaning up the pollutants was much easier than facing the evil god directly. Charlotte still adopted the old method of dealing with the evil god, constantly compressing the domain of the Lord of Decay, burning the decaying land with fire, and shoveling up the polluted land and sending it to the mountain where he killed the Lord of Dirt and his body became. Using the body of the evil god to contain the excrement of another evil god is also a scientific and effective method. Although this method was not very efficient, it allowed the Knights of Favonius to gradually compress the domain of the Lord of Decay. Soon, Charlotte encountered a counterattack from this evil god. Hundreds of thousands of rotten polluters emerged from the depths of the evil god's domain and marched towards the front battlefield. This thing made up of countless rotten things could not even be called a living being, nor was it worthy of being called an evil spirit. Their combat effectiveness was not worth mentioning, but it was too smelly and there were so many of them. This battle was the most difficult battle the Knights of Favonius had ever fought. Every day, soldiers requested psychological treatment. Although Charlotte could remove the dirt and protect the holy orders and soldiers under her from the harm of the rotten polluters, their psychological trauma and shadows were difficult to erase for a while. This war lasted for a full year and a half. During this year and a half, the pattern of the old continent had also undergone earth-shaking changes. Chapter 625 Blasphemer. The four empires have been at war for years. Fars and Barrow, the two countries with the most intense fighting, were the first to collapse. Ingram's national strength was greatly consumed because of the opening of the Ojibwe Island battlefield. Its economy was even worse than Barrow's. Barrow at least plundered the Black Phoenix and got the support of Duchess Misu and Count Constantine. The Lionheart dynasty was slightly better, but it was difficult to support itself. Moreover, the battlefield was in Barrow. The Lionheart dynasty had always had a voice and did not need to fight for the Barrow people. After all, the governors of Barrow were all blood clans, and they were not on the same camp as the human race. As an emperor, Baldwin Asa could not go against the opinions of most nobles. The four empires were tired of the war, and people kept secretly contacting Zimmerman and asked Zimmerman for a truce. Just over a month ago, Zimmerman suddenly sent an open note to the four empires, asking them to recognize the legitimacy of his occupation of the land and recognize the new country. If he obtained the recognition of the four empires, he could consider restoring peace at his discretion. The four empires almost did not hesitate, and each sent a formal envoy to enter Zimmerman's territory. Although the four empires and the immigrants of the New World have not signed an agreement, the truce has been put on the agenda. During this period, Charlotte has moved the Emilia and the Holy Light Kingdom to the battlefield and placed them at the forefront. He also built 12 temples of the Serpent of Fate and dozens of lighthouses around the domain of the Lord of Decay, and turned the surrounding land into a maze, preparing to launch the final battle against this evil god. When he got the news, he had nothing to say except a long sigh. Charlotte Mecklen is now a qualified politician. He knows that as long as Zimmerman is not crazy and does not intend to continue fighting, those small countries that have perished will be perished, and no one will care about their lives. In order to stop the war, the four empires will make compromises and concessions. To be honest, there is no hatred between Charlotte and Zimmerman. Well, it is nonsense to snatch the empire rose. First, he has never robbed it. Second, even if it was robbed, it would not be a big deal. Although Mendelman's charm is unparalleled in the world, it really cannot influence the situation of the entire continent. Because of a beautiful woman, the war between several empires is a myth and a novel, and it will never be real history. Unless history is too ugly, it needs to be covered up by a beauty. As for Charlotte accidentally destroying part of Zimmerman's plan, it has been destroyed anyway, and Zimmerman may not want to pursue it to the end. If there is a choice, Charlotte also wants to withdraw from the battle. There is room for easing between him and Zimmerman. After all, Zimmerman just wants to become a god, he just wants to live well. There are conflicts between the two, but they are not unsolvable. However, even if Zimmerman stops the war, Charlotte cannot go back to his territory and enjoy the hard-won peace. Because, there is no room for compromise between him and the evil god. He is not fighting for Fars, Inglima and Ojibwe Island, but for the righteous god. Charlotte Mecklen and the Serpent of Fate, one of the 9 righteous gods, have been firmly tied together. The old man with the lantern added a procedure and gave him the Dead Sea parchment scroll containing countless evil god fragments. Only when the righteous gods win the war can he truly escape from the war and resume a peaceful life. After receiving this news, Charlotte accelerated the siege of the Lord of Decay. After a year and a half of hard fighting, the influence of this evil god has shrunk to the area of a district in Strasbourg. His body's power has also been severely damaged and has become extremely weak. Charlotte was already well prepared, and this time he launched an all-out attack. His Knights of Favonius have obtained more than 600 land battleships, nearly 1,000 centurions, and even more than 150,000 centurions, and have accumulated enough strength. On the 6th day of the final battle against the Lord of Decay, Charlotte was supervising the battle on the battlefield. This time, all the saints of the Dukedom of Mecklen were out, and the sky was full of streamers of light. In terms of grandeur, it was more magnificent than any battle in the old continent. The land warships and centurions on the ground cooperated with each other, and in the battle with the Lord of Decay, the corrupt polluters who gave birth to the Lord of Decay were almost pushed forward. Except for the need to clean up after the war, there were almost no dangers in the battle. The centurions had a combat power comparable to that of high-level extraordinary people, and became the sharp edge of the assault force. Charlotte seemed to have sensed something, and suddenly disappeared into the void. Of course, he did not leave the battlefield, but entered another world. The Lord of Decay in this world is not a rotten meatball gathered by countless corpses, but has countless heads and arms, like a huge worm, but every bristle that drilled out of the body is a living undead spirit. No one can describe the weirdness of this guy. He should never appear in this world. Charlotte took a deep breath. He could sense the Lord of Decay's anger, rage, chaos, evil, filth, and surging evil thoughts as deep as the black sky. In this world, countless people are fighting. Many saints of the Knights of Favonius have become accustomed to fighting in this world with the blessing of the Holy Light Kingdom and Emilia. Of course, the two most active people are not the saints under Charlotte, but Amun and Emilia. They keep tearing off pieces of flesh from the Lord of Decay's huge body and throwing them into the void. Even if they are unwilling to devour these flesh bodies stained with the evil power of decay, these flesh and blood will be thrown into the mud mountain formed by the Lord of Dirt's body. In the mud mountain, they will be purified, or transformed, and become part of the Mud Mountain. The Lord of Decay, who looked like a giant worm, was over 10 kilometers long, and his waist was incredibly thick. However, more than a year ago, his body was at least 50 or 60 times larger than it is now. In the long battle, he lost up to 90% of his body. However, Charlotte has not yet found where his soul and authority are hidden, nor has he found his divine body. If he cannot deprive him of his authority and destroy his soul, this war will never end. Charlotte raised his flaming spear and joined the battle. His joining made the evil power of the Lord of Decay burn. The evil god had already marked Charlotte. This was his unforgettable enemy, his foe, and an unforgivable blasphemer. He must kill this small, despicable, and shameless human. Let him rot and disappear from every world. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.